Crime Spies. Hopefully we are working again. I don't know, I get so confused. Sometimes OBS doesn't work the way I want it to. Okay, so welcome back, Crime Spies. Here we are for our second House Committee subcommittee hearing. The first one we did this morning was an impeachment inquiry for Secretary Mayorkas, dereliction of duty, performing his secretarial duties of Homeland Security. So I was pleasantly surprised that my new friends I met through the Zachariah Anderson trial joined us for that hearing this morning, or well, early afternoon, I guess. This one was going on simultaneously, and apparently it started off quite spicy. So this is a little bit more polarizing than the border one. But I do appreciate everybody for coming in and watching, or just, lending an ear, because I've been watching these for several years now and find them insightful, let's just say. I also started another hat. We were talking on the last live stream. There's a lot of people that do crochet. There's a lot of people that do there's a lot of people that do knitting. I can't knit, but I can crochet. And I just wanted to show you on, where is it? Crochet. All right, so I do have a playlist on my Rumble, or on my YouTube channel, which is some things that I'm trying. This crochet messy bun beanie, I have a couple of those. But this neck warmer one, if you're brand new to crochet, I would say look at this one. All you need is like either a J or a K hook and some medium number 4 weight yarn. Don't use cotton yarn for those, because cotton doesn't stretch. Those are great for washcloths, and I make a lot of those. But when you're first learning crochet, if I were you, I would avoid the cotton until you get used to it. This one here, actually, I found this pattern, and I've made several of them. I have not twisted mine. I've just left mine plain. But she uses like a velvet yarn, and they're really pretty. So if you're new to crochet, I would strongly suggest watching that one. And I'll add a couple more. But like I said earlier, it's winter time here in Minnesota, and I do like to. I have started crocheting again. I had put it down for many, many years because I was just so busy with the kids, but it is kind of therapeutic, in fact. So without further delay, this hearing was 6 hours long. Chairman Jim Jordan, and there was an update on my computer. I'm wondering if that came through. There was one last night too. I'm not sure what's going on. Usually I let him talk in normal speed, and then I'll bump it up to 1.25. So hopefully you can join me for this. Like I said, for those of you on YouTube, I really appreciate the fact that you're at least giving it a chance, these subcommittee hearings. And of course, those of you on Rumble are used to watching these with me. So there's that, and then I'll get the chat put up. All right, let's begin. I have it fast forwarded to when they start. I thought I did. There.
Gentlelady from Washington, You want to lead us in the pledge when it's time? Okay. All right, I'm happy to. Committee will come to order without objection. The chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time pursuant to Committee Rule 2, House Rule 11, Clause 2. The chair may postpone further proceedings today on the question of approving any measure or matter or adopting an amendment for which a recorded vote is ordered. Now recognize the gentleman from Texas. Gentleman from Texas to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic.
Hi, Arends. Hello.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to notice, I call up the report recommending that the House of Representatives cite Robert Hunter Biden for contempt of Congress and move that the committee report it to the House. The clerk will report the report.
Resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find Robert Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress for refusal to comply.
Without objection, the report will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. Who is the big guy?
I know.
We all know. We all think we know. Seems pretty common sense, but who is it? That's one of the questions we'd want to ask Hunter Biden. What was the business? What was the service that the Bidens provided?
So, spoiler alert, like I said, this one started the exact same time as the Mayorkas impeachment one did in the Homeland Security Committee hearing. And I always like to start these on a delay just simply because there's always a break and some of these people, you know, talk really slow and, you know, we try to get through them. And so I had it scheduled, and then right before, well, like a half an hour or so before it started, the internet was all abuzz because apparently Hunter Biden did actually show up for this. And then shortly thereafter, stormed out. The picture I put in the thumbnail is actually from this hearing. So when I first started the Homeland Security one about Mayorkas, Urong was in the chat on the Rumble side, and I told him, I said, I waffled, like, should I bump that up? So this one just ended, it's my understanding, about 45 minutes ago. So it is a rewatch, but it did just end. So that's all I know, because we've been busy watching the other one.
What was the president's son doing to earn millions of dollars from foreign entities in jobs he wasn't qualified to have? And what did the president know about his family's foreign financial entanglements? These are just some of the questions that Congress needs answers to as part of our impeachment inquiry. To get those answers, the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee issued subpoenas to Mr. Biden, compelling him to appear for a joint deposition on December 13th. Mr. Biden came to the Capitol on December 13th, but did not come to the committees for that deposition. Instead, he staged a press conference in front of the Capitol. This flagrant disregard for Congress's constitutional oversight role clearly merits a citation of contempt. It's an open and shut case. Mr. Biden was issued an authorized subpoena, and without asserting any valid privilege, frankly, I don't think he asserted any privilege, valid or not, he didn't show up to testify. This is a vote to protect our institution. Hunter Biden is a critical witness in the House's official impeachment inquiry and uniquely possesses knowledge about what role the president may have played in leveraging policy-making decisions to enrich the Biden family. Of course, the American people deserve to hear directly from Hunter Biden about these facts. And we fully intend for Mr. Biden to testify before the public, but as is often the practice across committees under Republicans and Democrats, he should first sit for a deposition so that the American people get a full airing of the facts. Here's just a few things we need Hunter Biden to shed more light on. During a transcribed interview with the Oversight Committee, Devin Archer, longtime associate of Mr. Biden, described how President Biden was, quote, the brand, and was used to send, quote, signals of power, access, and influence to enrich the Biden family from foreign sources while he served as vice president. Mr. Archer testified that Mr. Biden placed his father on speakerphone during meetings with business associates approximately 20 times. We know one of those calls was made on December 4th, 2015. On that date, while Hunter Biden was in Dubai with Burisma executives Mr. Zolochevsky and Mr. Bazarski, they asked Hunter Biden to help alleviate the pressure they were under from the prosecutor in Ukraine. According to Mr. Archer, after that request was made, Hunter Biden, quote, called his dad. We know that a year after Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma, Vice President Biden attended a dinner at Cafe Milano on April 16th, 2015 with Mr. Bazarski and Hunter Biden and Devin Archer. Devin Archer, who was also on this Ukrainian energy company's board. What then Vice President Biden did with Burisma is the blueprint for how this whole influence peddling scheme worked. There are 4 fundamental facts about the Biden's involvement with this company. Fact number 1, Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma's, board of directors of Burisma and made millions of dollars. Fact number 2, Hunter Biden was not qualified to be on the board. Not my words. He said so himself in an interview on ABC News. Fact number 3, Burisma executives asked Hunter Biden to help alleviate the pressure they were under from the prosecutor in Ukraine. Fact number 4, Vice President Biden used his official position to hold up American tax dollars going to Ukraine until that pressure was off Burisma. He conditioned the release of funds on the firing of the prosecutor who was applying the pressure to the company that his son sat on the board of. And these facts are corroborated with the confidential human source who told the FBI and was quoted in the 1023 form. In fact, the prosecutor, Victor Shokin, is mentioned 8 times by the confidential human source in that 1023 form. That same form, by the way, that Director Wray tried to prevent Congress from seeing. The confidential human source said Burisma hired Hunter Biden to protect us through his dad from all kinds of problems. In addition to all that, the House Ways and Means Committee uncovered a threatening 2017 message from Mr. Biden to a Chinese business executive related to a business deal in which Mr. Biden wrote, quote, I'm sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. 9 days later, Mr. Biden invoked his father in that threatening message. A company affiliated with that business wired $5 million to a company jointly established by Mr. Biden. The same day, Mr. Biden transferred $400,000 from this joint venture to his personal company, and it appears now that President Biden ultimately received $40,000 of those proceeds. Rather than come before us and answer questions about these and other concurring instances of the Biden family trading cash for influence, Hunter Biden held a press conference a few hundred yards away from here, press conference where he said, I'm happy to answer questions in public, but when he finished his statement, he abruptly left, taking no questions from the press. We have no choice but to hold Mr. Biden in contempt, and I would encourage a yes vote. We now yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, goody.
After a year like 2023,
My favorite.
year marked in the House of Representatives by Republican infighting, the ouster of a speaker,
Nadler.
and growing legal peril for the former president, you would think that House Republicans would want to turn the page and try their hand at some actual legislating. It is unfortunate,
Actually, he's
but not
better than that
surprising,
other lady
that the
that
MAGA wing of the Republican
substitutes
Party
for him.
seems impervious to learning from its recent past. They seem committed to the same political stunts that have, by any measure, made their majority the least productive Congress in modern history. Their own members acknowledge how little they have accomplished. So here we are again, just days before a government shutdown, with war raging in Gaza and Ukraine.
Once I get to know your personalities more on the politics stuff, I do have some, well, you know how I had the orange judge guy thing for the Zachariah Anderson trial? Well, I've got some dandies for some of these political figures, but I don't want to offend anybody, so I'm just going to keep them to myself for a little while.
With Americans at home facing real problems that require our attention, House Republicans want us to know that their highest priority is, once again, Hunter Biden. And why are they chasing Hunter Biden? They are certainly not chasing him because they have uncovered evidence of any wrongdoing by President Biden or the Biden administration. Over the course of this investigation, such as it is, we have collected thousands of pages of documents and spoken to more than a dozen witnesses. One of those witnesses was Special Counsel David Weiss, who took the unprecedented step of sitting for an interview in the middle of an ongoing criminal investigation. After all of that work, House Republicans have found not a shred of evidence to suggest that President Biden was anything other than a supportive father to his son, or that his administration in any way exerted political pressure on the investigation into Hunter Biden's conduct. True, every few days, House Republicans hold up some copy of a bank record or excerpt from a transcript and claim that at long last they have finally found the smoking gun. But like clockwork, often within minutes, each new claim is thoroughly debunked. Then a few days pass and they do it again, and round we go. If Chairman Jordan and Chairman Comer were really interested in letting the American people see just how little they have found to support their accusations, they would release the transcripts of our interviews in full, instead of cherry-picking words out of context to mislead the public. For that matter, if House Republicans were genuinely interested in hearing testimony from Hunter Biden, they would have honored their initial offer to have Mr. Biden testify in public. I understand Mr. Biden is still willing to appear at a public hearing at the time and place of the chairman's choosing. I hear my Republican colleagues when they say that a congressional subpoena must be honored exactly as it is written. But you will forgive me if their newfound care for the institution sounds a little thin. This whole investigation is premised on the claim that the president is somehow profiting from his office. Let's set aside for the moment the fact that this claim is entirely evidence-free. No, I have trouble taking this new interest in foreign corruption seriously because these same Republicans did nothing while President Trump took millions from foreign interests in violation of the Emoluments Clause to the Constitution. Thanks to our Democratic colleagues on the Oversight Committee, we now know that Trump received at least $7.8 million from 20 foreign governments, including the governments of China, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, while he was in office and while he was negotiating with those same governments. Unless it is to defend the former president, House Republicans are steadfastly silent when it comes to Donald Trump's actual, open, documented corruption. But they need to hold Hunter Biden in contempt because he once paid his father $1,400 for a 2018 Ford Raptor? Please. Republicans say that this contempt vote is necessary because it's important for the committee to defend its prerogatives. Again, this new concern for the rights and privileges of the Judiciary Committee seems wholly insincere. As we speak, the Homeland Security Committee is holding an impeachment hearing. By all reports, they intend to bypass Judiciary altogether to bring articles of impeachment to the floor. The Constitution gives the sole power of impeachment to the House of Representatives, and for the whole of modern history, the House has delegated that authority to this committee, until today. I do not know whether the decision to cede our jurisdiction to House Homeland was made with Chairman Jordan's blessing or over his objection, but either way, it is a terrible precedent. The decision has permanently diminished us. It weakens future chairmen of both parties, and you have ceded this ground, apparently, so that you have time to bully the president's son. And let us not forget the elephant in the room. House Republicans say that we must force Hunter Biden to comply with this subpoena, but they said nothing when Attorney General Barr and White House counsel Don McGahn stonewalled this committee. They cheered the former president on when he vowed never to comply with any of our requests. And the chairman himself blew off a valid subpoena for his testimony from the January 6th Select Committee. What chutzpah, what gall. Whatever technical excuses you made for yourself at the time, Mr. Chairman, I assure you, Hunter Biden does the same. This committee has an obligation to work in good faith towards an accommodation with Hunter Biden, and to my knowledge, there is no precedent for holding a person in contempt who remains willing to testify. You may score points with the MAGA base by forcing this vote today, but you threaten to do real damage to our ability to secure evidence and testimony in the future. As with so much of this Republican Congress, there is a reasonable deal to be had here. House Republicans just refuse to take it. This contempt report is poorly timed, riddled with factual errors, and rife with hypocrisy. It has nothing to do with solving real problems for real people. I urge my colleagues to oppose it, and I hold out hope that this committee will return to more pressing work someday soon. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes himself for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee report for the resolution recommending that the House of Representatives
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read
love
and shall be
Jim
considered
Jordan.
as base text for the purpose of
I
the
call him
amendment.
Jim the
chair now
Bulldog Jordan.
recognizes himself to explain the amendment. This amendment makes a small grammatical change on page 17 of the report. It does not affect the substance of the report. I yield back. Who seeks recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Swallow, is recognized.
Oh,
I'll come to you, I
another committee hearing with Mr. Fang Fang.
Mr. Chairman, is this a joke?
We're bumping
No,
him up.
seriously, is this hearing a joke? This is a committee that now cares?
Okay, I'm going to have a really hard time biting my tongue for this. Hello, Lynn. Again, the last hearing on the border, both sides, in my opinion, should come together in agreement. So I think that's more, politically neutral, I guess. This is not. This is very polarizing, this whole thing. But like I mentioned on the previous one and also earlier in the chat, I had to suffer through 4 years of the GOP being in the minority. So the past 2 congressional terms were horrible. All it was is orange man bad, orange man bad, orange man bad, orange man bad. And so I'm going to try to be not very vocal, and I'd like you to listen. But again, this is way more polarizing. You're either on one side of the fence of this or not. Now, I will tell you on my Rumble channel, Follow the Money is a really great audiobook by Dan Bongino. He actually reads that one too, narrates it as well, which is always great. I know Glenn Beck does his readings too. He's got voices and stuff. But that book came out many, many years ago. Bad. So I mean, all of this stuff, I'm aware of. I just find it really entertaining that the Democrats on this side, after like I said, having to suffer through the last 2 congressional being in the minority and all of their garbage, that they come up with this. But I'll try to be quiet.
About subpoena compliance, and we're going to hold
they're
somebody
just
in contempt
hypocrites,
for
I guess is
subpoena
what I'm trying to say.
compliance. That's really interesting because
Yes,
to
Supp.
me, it
Schrader
seems
is
like
the orange man.
you
bad.
believe we all had our memories wiped 608 days ago when you failed to honor your own subpoena. You see, on May 31,
see?
2022,
Remember the last one?
as the January 6th committee was investigating the greatest crime
With
ever
all
committed
their-
in America,
you're
with
gonna
the
have
most
fun with
arrests, the
this
most
committee.
convictions, a crime against our Congress, our Constitution, our
This
democracy.
committee will make you
all
wanna
they wanted
throw
was for you and a few of
things.
your colleagues to cooperate, to provide any information you had. And what you all did for 608 days and counting, you didn't show up. And you want us to
They've
take
got
this
little
proceeding seriously?
Honest to God, if
where
you guys have
have
never watched these or
an
don't
issue
watch
with
them
somebody
very
else's
often,
compliance with a
trials are
subpoena,
good,
somebody who actually is willing
these
to come
are
forward publicly, something you were not willing to do,
very
something you and Mr. McCarthy
interesting.
and others who were asked to testify were not willing to do. So seriously, is this a joke? If it's a joke, great. This whole Congress has been a joke, so it would be in line and on brand with what has been taking place. But I have to ask, how dumb do you think the American people are that you would seek to hold someone in contempt when you are 608 days, 15 hours, 21 minutes, and 47 seconds out of compliance of your own
he can
subpoena?
read
I don't know,
numbers,
Mr. Chairman,
that's
if it is your practice to look the other way when crimes are committed, but it's not my practice, and it's not my colleagues' practice. So what is this really all about? It's about this chairman, Speaker Johnson, and the MAGA majority acting as
I do have
Insurrection
bingo cards too. I
LLP,
should find them.
creating the biggest law firm in Washington, D.C., to work every single day in this building on behalf of just one client, the former president, Donald
There's
Trump,
usually
and to
a
carry
theme
out
they
his
all
petty
have.
grievances every single day. Okay, that's great. You won the majority. It's your prerogative. But the cost to the American people is we aren't doing a single thing in this committee to address gun violence, the mass shootings that occurred in the 3 weeks that we were gone. We haven't done anything to address what's going on at the border, a president who's willing to negotiate and find ways to better secure it. We're not doing anything to bring down the cost of health care and take
Girl
on
is back.
the
This one's the
pocketbook,
spicy
financial
one.
breathing room issues that the American people care about.
Did you hear his comment just about the border? The president is trying to, secure the border. Well, that's what the last 4-hour congressional hearing was about that he attended. So,
Okay, let's talk about Hunter. Mr. Comer and Mr. Jordan said, we want Hunter Biden to come in. Hunter Biden said, okay, I will come in. Mr. Comer said 2 different times, we will take his testimony publicly or we will take it privately. We will take it publicly or we will take it privately. Hunter Biden said, okay, let's do it publicly. I don't trust you all to take it privately because you haven't released the depositions that you have taken privately. Can't blame him for that. He wants to come in and testify publicly. You won't take yes for an answer, and so then you move it to let's take it privately. I think you want to take it privately because you have nothing. I think you want to take it privately because you don't want to see Marjorie Taylor Greene display the non-consensual nudes from Hunter's laptop again. I think that's why you want to take it privately. But he comes in anyway. You won't take yes for an answer. And let me just break some news for you, Mr. Chairman. Just down the hallway, Hunter Biden is sitting in the Oversight Committee. He's ready to testify publicly, it appears. So let me just challenge you one more time. If you're so eager to take his testimony publicly, I move that we adjourn right now and take his public testimony and bring him in here right now.
Oh,
the gentleman make a motion?
oh. Oh, okay, now that makes sense. Did you hear him? He just said, okay, so this whole hearing was set up because they were going to cite him for contempt of Congress. And then because, you know, we're doing this on a delay and we did the border one first, we know that he actually did come in and then stormed out. So this was part of the plan because he just said that. Interesting. Okay, making a note.
Question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the
Recorded
chairman,
vote.
the noes have it.
Recorded
Gentleman's
vote.
requested recorded vote. Clerk will
You
call
see,
the
they
roll.
just wait.
Mr. Jordan?
It's just a
Mr. Jordan votes
nonstop
no.
waste of time.
Mr. Isa? Mr. Isa votes no. Mr. Buck?
See, now they're
Mr.
going to take a
Gates?
vote.
Mr. Gates?
Okay, so for those of you that are new to watching these House committee hearings, well, you might want to get a drink. Make sure you take your heart medication. Grab your crochet, because I found it very therapeutic the other day when I was listening to the end of that travesty of justice, Zachariah Anderson trial. You know, it gives your hands something to do other than throwing things. But usually it's a nonstop point of order or call for a vote, or they just disrupt the whole entire time.
Gates votes no. 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 Mr. Van
Another
Drew?
reason why I like to do
Hageman?
these on a
Ms.
delay,
Dye?
because there's
Ms.
just
Shiapaw?
nonstop
Ms.
shenanigans
McBath?
usually.
Ms. Bush?
Which actually, in the last two congressional sessions,
Colleen report.
the GOP never did this, and if they did, they were Hi, Scott McGinnis. Welcome to
All
Crime
members voted?
Spies Alter Ego, the subcommittee hearings.
Clerk will tally and report.
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, there are 12 ayes and 15 noes.
The motion to adjourn is not agreed to.
I love
Gentleman,
Jim Jordan.
gentleman from California yields back.
I'm not
Yield
gonna
back. Oh, I'm
lie.
sorry.
I call him Bulldog.
The chair
I yield
recommend- the chair recommends himself. I would just say this. Why didn't they hold me in contempt?
I move to
Why
hold
didn't the committee hold me? They certainly could have. It was a completely
Would the
partisan
gentleman,
moved.
would the
committee.
gentleman yield? And I'll explain why.
No. Well, in a second, I want to finish my time here. It was a completely partisan committee. Why not do it? I mean, the idea that if you could have held the future Speaker of the House, the future Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the Freedom in contempt, why didn't you do it? I think they didn't do it because they knew it was bogus. They knew that
gentleman yield?
the speech or debate clause would not allow them to compel someone member of Congress to come testify.
Will the
But by the
gentleman-
way, I never said I wouldn't testify. I wrote an 11-page letter to Chairman Thompson. I'm still waiting on a response, where I spelled out all the concerns we had with this committee, all the things we had caught them saying that were not accurate.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, it's my 5 minutes. I'll yield and we'll have plenty of time. I'm sure there'll be a debate. They never made a record of it. We made a record of Hunter Biden not showing last week. We actually had a court reporter there. We made a record of him not showing up for his deposition when he was over doing a press conference on the Capitol, outside the Capitol.
See, Swift, I gotta
So,
upload the picture.
I think the Democrats know how ridiculous that was. And with that, I would yield to the gentleman from California.
I think the chairman, my colleague, Mr. Swalwell,
this is Darrell
who
Issa.
participated in that contempt by asking for and holding that press conference for Hunter Biden, knows very well the history of this committee. This committee has always enforced our legitimate subpoenas. When I was an early member of this committee, then Chairman Conyers, John Conyers, held the Bush White House in contempt, took it all the way through, and Judge Bates, a appointee of President George W. Bush, held that, in fact, you must come before this committee. There's no question that after we go through this process of contempt, a floor vote, and ultimately a court challenge, that Hunter Biden will be ordered to come here. He'll be ordered to come here for the same reason that Harriet Miers was ordered to show up when George W. Bush, within his rights, fired 9 of his own appointees, and this committee had questions as to the motive. That's a sad piece of history for some of us, because some of us were not supportive of that contempt motion. But in retrospect, this committee has always asserted its rights when those rights were violated, and they were violated by Hunter Biden. and they are still to this day being violated, except as Congressman Swalwell just made very clear, Hunter Biden is thumbing his nose not once during the day of his subpoena, but even today, while he sits over in a hearing.
Farrell, another thing. Oh my God. I don't know if Debbie Wasserman Schultz is on here. She's another one where it's like, reclaiming my time. I do have bingo cards. I should find where I put them. But if there's like certain words, and once they, start going, you'll notice like a narrative. I'm not sure as much with this one, but we'll see. Because like I said, spoiler alert, he apparently does show up, and he's there for a short while and then takes off.
Not testifying, simply sort of going, nah, I've got you. Well, you know what? This is too serious a committee. This is not a joke, Mr. Swalwell. This is the most significant committee of the Congress because we take seriously people coming before it. We take serious the threat of impeachment. And in fact, we are the committee that when impeachment does happen, it has to come through. So quite frankly, this is not a joke. I look forward to us marking this up, moving it out, having a vote on it, and ultimately getting Hunter Biden to answer questions about his undoubted selling of the Vice President of the United States, of his last name, selling it around the world to countries including Russia, Ukraine, China, and others. I don't think there's any question that the evidence is clear. Now the question is, will he come forward or will he take the fifth? And I'm going to predict, Mr. Chairman, that when it's all said and done, Hunter Biden will simply take the fifth. He's just trying to delay that as long as he can. And if he can, he'd like to have it like a few others have over the years, where he makes a speech about his innocence and then takes the fifth. You and I were there for that when the IRS did that. I believe we're going to see that. But
Scott
whether it
McGinnis.
occurs publicly or privately does.
Scott McGinnis, there's no difference between the D's and the R's. It's a deep state uniparty. 100%. 100% agree with that. There are certain ones that are good, and a lot of bad. A lot of bad uniparty.
Does make a difference. If he's just going to take the fifth, which I suspect he ultimately will, then he should do it behind closed doors and not have a public stage to do it. And Mr. Swalwell, you can chastise the chairman, but subpoenaing members of Congress is something we do not do under speech and debate for good and valid reason. It's the reason that you're not subpoenaed here today in this contempt after what you did with Hunter Biden. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The gentleman of California is recognized as the gentleman. Amendment at the desk. The clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Reserve, point of order.
Report for the resolution recommending that the House of
Judiciary and
Representatives
House
find Robert Hunter
for
Biden in
Homeland
contempt of
Security
Congress
are
for
making
refusal to
meetings.
comply with the subpoena duly issued.
Without objection, the amendment we consider is read. The gentleman from California is recognized to explain his amendment.
Oh, here we go.
Today, Chairman Jim Jordan has convened a hearing to take action against someone he says ignored a congressional subpoena. Today, Jim Jordan says that failure of this witness to
Why do I
appear
think
was,
that he
quote,
was involved
in
in
blatant
having
disregard of
trouble?
Congress's oversight role. Today, Jim Jordan says we must respond because, quote, he didn't show up to testify, unquote. And I say, bravo. Jim Jordan is finally ready to take action against Jim Jordan. This amendment would amend the
Look at him,
contempt
he's
resolution
smirking
and
like being
provide
funny.
the form of the resolution that the Committee on the Judiciary would recommend to the House of Representatives, citing Robert Hunter Biden and Jim Jordan for contempt of Congress, pursuant to this report as follows. Resolved that Robert Hunter Biden and Jim Jordan shall be found in contempt of Congress for failure to comply with a congressional subpoena. Now, I know the chairman wouldn't want an ordinary citizen to be treated differently than a member of Congress. So let's run through some of the facts. On December 22nd, the Select Committee of Congress investigating a violent attack on the Capitol requested that Jim Jordan provide information for the committee's investigation. Knowing that Mr. Jordan was a recipient witness to some of these events, had conversations with those involved in planning efforts to overturn the election. On January 9th, Jordan responded to the Select Committee's request with a letter refusing to comply. On May 12th of 2022, the Select Committee subpoenaed Jim Jordan, along with others, for deposition testimony as part of our investigation into the January 6th attack. On May 27th, Jordan failed to appear for his scheduled deposition before the Committee of Congress. On May 31st, the Select Committee indicated that Representative Jordan should appear for deposition testimony no later than June 11th. But Representative Jordan once again did not appear before the Select Committee on or before the June 11th, 2022 deadline, and he was referred to the Committee on Ethics. And so today we can remedy this situation. We can show some consistency if we're going to hold Hunter Biden in contempt for not showing up before the committee when he's offered to come and testify publicly. But if we're going to hold him in contempt for that, then surely we would hold Jim Jordan in contempt for his failure to appear before Congress. So this amendment would simply add Jim Jordan's failure to appear before Congress, his blatant disregard of congressional oversight, to use the words of the chairman himself, and remedy this by including him in the contempt report referring to prosecution for potential prosecution for contempt of Congress.
I don't know if you can see these, but I made some new earrings for my House subcommittee hearings. June said she went out in the snow because she thought she got her new earrings. It was a replacement tumbler lid. And I'm like, oh, that's right, I made new earrings.
And I would urge everyone's support. And with that, I'm happy to yield to any of my colleagues. I yield to Mr. Nadler.
Thank you. Let me just say that I will vote for this amendment with misgivings. I will vote for it because it improves the resolution. I will vote for it with misgivings because it cites Hunter Biden for contempt, while in fact Hunter Biden has repeatedly stated his willingness to come before this committee in open session and to come before the Oversight Committee in open session, and he's there right now. So he should not be cited for contempt because he's willing to testify. He's volunteered repeatedly to testify before either or both committees. I will vote for the amendment nonetheless because it does improve this terrible underlying resolution. And I thank you. I yield back.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
I will also support this with some misgivings. The committee, when the chairman refused to comply with our subpoena, the January 6th subpoena, did have a discussion about enforcement. And by the way, the speech or debate clause does not apply because the Constitution says that members may not be called to account in any other body. And in fact, it isn't another body, it's the House of Representatives, so speech or debate does not protect. But in our discussions, we had a concern about separation of powers and referring the members of Congress to another branch of government for enforcement of our subpoena. That is why we sent this to the Ethics Committee. However, given that the chairman apparently is critical of that suggestion, I will support Mr. Schiff's amendment. I would just like to note, if I may also, that there has been some considerable confusion about the committee's position on public testimony. No potential witness insisted to the committee that they testify in public. Had they done so, we would have been forced to allow that to occur. Public as composed to formal hearings in the Cannon office building. Mr. Bannon never agreed to testify and unfortunately refused to send documents, so that as a precedent is simply inappropriate. And I yield back to the gentleman from California with thanks.
Time has expired. Does the gentleman insist on his point of order?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman is recognized.
For a number of reasons, Rule 10 confers on the Committee on Ethics exclusive jurisdiction over members of Congress. Additionally, Rule 16, Clause 7, puts this outside of our jurisdiction. And, Mr. Chairman, in an analog way, it is clear that the January 6th committee expired at the end of the last Congress without ever making any sort of a motion or referral. In fact, they seem to have ignored your responses. In ignoring your responses, they very clearly accepted your non-appearance. And although they would like to rewrite history now, they had an opportunity to take action. They did not take action. So for those rules of the Congress, in addition to the common sense that there is no subpoena in place, because subpoenas, as you know, expire at the end of a Congress, as did the January 6th committee, I would continue to hold this as out of order.
The gentleman's
Chairman?
The gentleman from the ranking member is recognized.
What Mr. Issa said is a very interesting statement, but I don't understand what his point of order is. What is he objecting to?
Yes, it's beyond the scope and purpose of today's resolution. In other words, you can't amend it to add under Rule 16, Clause 7.
Gentleman.
Are you making a point of order against the amendment?
Yeah. The gentleman's amendment does not satisfy. The gentleman from California's amendment does not satisfy the subject matter and fundamental purpose test. Therefore, it is not germane and is out of order. Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman, on that point, before the chair rules,
I've already ruled, but the
I would appeal the ruling of the chair.
For those of you who don't watch these
gentleman is recognized to appeal the
committee
ruling. Chair. Gentleman appeals the ruling of the chair.
hearings, now you'll see why nothing ever
the motion is not beyond the scope of this report because
You've already made a motion to appeal the ruling of the chair because I already ruled, so the clerk will
And
call the
it's way
roll on
better
appealing.
ordered this
Mr. Chairman,
time
I
than
move
the
to table.
preceding ones.
Gentleman moves to table. The motion is not debatable. The question is on the motion to table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Watch, they're
opposed?
gonna have
No.
Opinion of the chair is the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, we request a recorded vote.
See?
Gentleman from California requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan
See
votes
this?
yes. Mr.
You
Isa?
see
Aye.
this? This is why
Mr. Isa votes aye.
These are
Mr. Massey?
important to
Mr. Pence
watch.
votes yes. Mr. Fry? Owen votes no. Mr. Iapol votes Ms. Ballant?
Table the
wonder how many
ruling
we'll
of the
have.
appeal of
That
the chair
was two.
is
Mr. Chairman, there are 18 ayes and 13.
the motion to table the ruling of the appeal of the chair is agreed to. And who
Mr.
seeks
Chairman,
recognition?
I have unanimous consent request.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for UC.
I asked unanimous consent to enter into the record an article titled, "During January 6th hearing, Schiff doctored text messages between Mark
Oh, I
Meadows and
love
Rep.
him,
Jim Jordan."
too.
This was an
Massey.
article in the Federalist, December 15th, 2021.
Without objection, who's next on our list?
Maybe they're finally growing a pair over on the GOP side.
Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Start pulling
Gentleman from
some
Texas recognized for 5
handshakes.
minutes.
I thank you.
Oh,
I
and this
asked this
lady-
like the last
this
word.
lady here, I think
I
she's
want to
from, like,
follow up on
Russia,
my friend from
Ukraine.
California,
She's
Mr. Isa,
good,
about the
too.
importance and the level of
Miss Jackson, we
cruciality,
have
I
to bump
use
you
that
up.
terminology, of this committee's work. It is constitutionally grounded. And there's no other committee in the House and its counterpart in the Senate that has the custodial responsibilities of the accuracy and the integrity of the Constitution. That means that we should take our work extensively and very seriously. We can begin to quote documents
She had some kind
which
of
include the very
scandal, too.
essence of our message. And I always like to remind you that the Constitution begins by saying, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility." But I'd like to focus on the idea of establish justice. We can procedurally try to maneuver my good friend's inactions of not showing this committee respect by not appearing and responding to the subpoena. I call Chairman Jordan my good friend because we've worked together for years. But you did not show up and present yourself to this committee, whether or not it was in this session or the last session. Now, as we proceed, we will hear on the other side a constant pointing to members who did their service on the January 6th committee. They will take pot shots at Mr. Schiff. They will find dated and unheard commentary that they will utilize, which I believe will continue to diminish the importance and integrity of this particular session and constitutional responsibilities of impeachment. I, too, was going to have misgivings of the amendment that would have joined
I'm
Mr.
pleasantly
Jordan,
surprised a lot of
because
you
I am not
think the
ceding the
same way
point
I do.
that Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, should be held in contempt. And I will continue that approach through the rest of this markup. There is no evidence. How can you have evidence of contempt when you have an open and public statement that I will appear? I will appear. I will use my constitutional rights of appearing with counsel, and I will come before the committee. I was there on that day when he was available to come. How can you argue that he did not come when you made no effort to indicate that we are waiting for you in the hearing room, set up for you to come now and speak? That was not done. And if I want to go a step further, I'm not suggesting to Mr. Biden that I would want that to be the case, but no law enforcement was sent to direct him to the Judiciary Committee room in 2141 Rayburn on the House side. And so you cannot make an argument that Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, should be held in contempt. The only argument you want is to continue to give a circus-like atmosphere to this very important committee that, under the Constitution, is to be able to establish justice. Justice. There is no cause for what we're doing today. There is no basis for it. There is no evidence for it. There is no reason for it. Again, I do not believe Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, should be held in contempt. All of the allegations that you have are simply that. Allegations of the abuse of power, the misuse of the relationship of father and son, all of that has to be proven.
She does
But you are
look
going
like
at it,
Lady
and we will hear
Liberty
all of
with
these
her-
bits and pieces and drops from the January 6th committee
sure
and
that's like a
so-called
guarantee.
interactions between members on that committee that you either like or dislike, and we all will probably have a say in that. You cannot take away the sacred responsibility of the January 6th and this committee that is constitutionally grounded. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to be clear. I would not have been happy voting on that particular amendment because I think that yours should have been separate. And I do not believe that Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, should be held in contempt at all, because I was there with you, Mr. Chairman, on that day, and you did not seem to make any effort to make sure that Mr. Biden knew he was welcomed in that committee at that time for us to hear him in an open setting. With that, I hope that we can establish justice in this committee for once and for all, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Okay,
I
Dan
submit
Bishop
that
is also.
whenever you have an issue under
was-
debate, the
he
surest
was also on
sign
that last committee.
of weakness in an argument is to avoid the question, to talk about anything but the question in issue. Now, I do compliment the gentlelady from Texas for her point just made. She focused on the issue, but I do eagerly undertake her challenge. She says, you cannot make an argument that Hunter Biden is in contempt. How can you argue he will not come? She said, when he said he would come. Well, here's how. He was issued a subpoena for a deposition. He stated publicly and in correspondence that he would not testify in a deposition, that he wanted to do it his way in an open hearing. Well, that's contempt. And it is open and shut, cut and dried, as simple as it can possibly be. So that the subject under debate is whether an ordinary citizen who defies a subpoena of a congressional impeachment inquiry should be held to account. And there is also no need, really, to debate that. Quite to the contrary from the suggestion of the gentlelady from California, the weight is all on the other side. And interestingly enough, in the matters of Bannon and Navarro, every member of the minority is on record to that effect. Indeed, members of the minority have gone farther than that. Mr. Raskin has specifically addressed the purported basis for objection that Hunter Biden has offered, stating that the proper course is to first have private testimony in a deposition to explore facts thoroughly and in the way that that mode of examination permits, and then to have a public hearing after. Nobody that I can recall in the minority took issue with that point. But here's really the salient and final aspect that makes this clear beyond argument. This may be the most brazenly recalcitrant witness defying Congress in the history of the Congress that I'm aware of. Now, there may be some other situation in which this has been done. But the person who is subject to the subpoena, I hear the laughter on the other side, so let me go further. I don't know that anyone has ever come onto the complex in the shadow of the United States Capitol building, suborned and assisted by another member of Congress, a member of this committee, stood in the triangle and vowed to the media that he was defying the subpoena of a congressional impeachment inquiry. I don't know that that's ever been done. And I certainly don't believe that it's ever been the case that a member of Congress has made arrangements for that brazen defiance of Congress to be expressed on the Capitol, in the Capitol complex, on the plaza. So if you want to talk about the issue, it is not a close call. If you want to talk about what happened in the previous Congress and whether Congress can subpoena members of Congress to testify before a committee, especially when that committee has falsified and fabricated evidence to its eternal shame, then you can talk about those other issues. And I would if I were you, because you certainly cannot meet the simple proposition that is before us now. And you certainly cannot deny the duty of this committee to respond to that brazen defiance.
Would the gentleman yield?
I will.
And I promise I'll yield back to you down the road. But the point I would just make here is that the difference between Hunter Biden and, as you mentioned, Navarro and Bannon, is that Navarro and Bannon totally stonewalled Congress. They didn't produce any documents. They didn't offer to testify in any way, and they didn't provide any testimony of any kind. By contrast here...
Let me take my time back, because I've only got another 20 seconds. And I don't want to just leave, and we'll come back to it and have a further colloquy if you like. And I appreciate the gentleman from Maryland's collegial interaction. I think that is a distinction without a difference. I don't think, in fact, I think it makes it worse that Hunter Biden goes to media and declares and decides how he will testify to Congress. He will come to a public meeting, but he will not do what Congress has commanded by a lawful subpoena. I don't think it's a distinction that favors him. I think it's one that requires us to act. And my time's expired.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? The gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I appreciate the passion from my friend across the aisle and the outrage. I think we're all outraged about many things. But if we're going to talk about outrageous things that have happened or things that have never happened, let's talk about the fact that President Trump incited an erection. And maybe that too.
Yeah, you could talk about that too, I guess.
Maybe we should talk about that too. The president incited an insurrection. Maybe we should talk about the fact that the former president was impeached twice. Maybe we should talk about the fact that the former president was convicted on 91 felony counts. Maybe we should talk about the fact that the former president was charged with interfering with our elections. Maybe we should talk about the fact that most, if not all, of the members of this committee, certainly leaders in the House, have continued to support and endorse a person who has literally talked about being a dictator from day one. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe this markup is an unbelievable waste of time. My Republican colleagues have been investigating Hunter Biden for years. My colleague, Mr. Ivey, just gave very important statements about why this is a different case than others that have been cited. There's been no indication whatsoever that any of his activities are connected to the president. They have turned up nothing. So why are we really here today? It is another distraction from the fact that, in the words of one of my colleagues on the other side, in this committee, by the way, said on the floor of the House, this Republican-controlled do-nothing Congress has not delivered one thing that Republicans can go home and say that they delivered to their constituents. In fact, this Congress is on track to be one of the most unproductive in modern history. This Republican-led House has only passed 27 bills that became law in spite of holding 724 votes. We still have no reauthorization of the Farm Bill, no bringing to the floor of a bipartisan bill that we passed in this committee around surveillance reform. We are on the verge of a government shutdown, and you just compare that to 2022, when Democrats controlled the House with a razor-thin majority. We held 549 votes, and 248 bills were signed into law. Now, none of this inaction stops my Republican colleagues from celebrating all the funding for infrastructure and jobs the Democrats passed without a single Republican vote. Not a single Republican voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, and yet there are many that go home to their constituents and keep crowing about how they're bringing money home from bills that they never voted for. But aside from claiming the work of Democrats, Republicans have no achievements to run on. And the American people should make no mistake that this hearing is pure political distraction. My colleagues would have you forget that under the Biden administration, 2.7 million jobs were created just last year, more than any year under the previous administration. That is a total of 14.3 million jobs created under President Joe Biden. My colleagues would have you forget that starting this month, more Americans with diabetes will finally see sharp decreases in insulin prices. Thanks to President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, people on Medicare now pay no more than $35 a month for insulin prescriptions. That is money in people's pockets at home. And these efforts put pressure on drug makers to lower their prices for people not on Medicare as well. House Democrats also passed and President Biden signed into law, making historic investments to lower prescription drug prices. We extended health care coverage to millions, health care that Republicans are just trying to take away, acted on climate change, spurred American chips manufacturing, all while creating millions of jobs, and finally starting to ensure that the wealthy pay their fair share in taxes. And that's not to mention that we as House Democrats used our gavels to pass the Women's Health Protection Act to protect the right to decide whether or not to have an abortion. We passed landmark legislation to protect voting rights, to protect the civil rights of LGBTQ Americans, common sense gun safety reforms, legislation to provide a roadmap to citizenship to dreamers and farm workers, bills that provided an increase to the federal minimum wage, and protecting the right to collective bargaining, all with the slim margins that Republicans now blame for gridlock. What we did the last two Congresses is what real leadership looks like. We didn't waste months of staff time and taxpayer resources chasing empty investigations to score cheap political points. Reject this bad faith resolution, and let's focus on things that actually deliver for the American people. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we're going to dig through the law, we're going to dig through the statutes, we're going to dig through the rules, and it's important. But I want to talk about what the man on the street, the man and woman on the street really sees here. And it's called rules for thee, but not for me. Democrat leaders in their desperate attempt for power continue to rewrite the rules in an effort to maintain that power. They're manipulating the courts to keep a political opponent off the presidential ballot. They disregard democracy by all but canceling their own primary process to make sure that they coronate President Biden. Democrats on TV openly endorse the chaos on the border, claiming illegal immigration is a way to help them with future redistricting. That's what it's really about. A party that is desperate for power. Leaders that are desperate for power can never be trusted with it. And I pray that they don't get it, because it will rip apart the fabric of this country. The pattern we see here paints a clear picture, and it's what people on the street see. Democrat leaders believe they are better than all of us, better than everyone else. And there's no clearer example than Hunter Biden, a man who's paraded.
Now, keep in mind, Van Drew here, he switched parties, 3 years ago, I think.
Around the world with our adversaries, a man who cheats on taxes to the tune of millions of dollars, a man who spends that tax money on escorts, drugs, alcohol, and luxury hotels, a man who illegally obtains a gun and then illegally disposes of said gun and was going to get off with hardly a slap on the wrist. Any other American wouldn't receive that type of justice. a deal that would have cleared him of all illegal acts. Unbelievable. We had an honest judge who never saw anything like that, and she couldn't even do it for the president or the vice president. The corruption is so blatant, it's hard to believe when you say it out loud. The truth is, Hunter Biden's a bad guy, and his corruption goes all the way to the top, all the way to the president, and he needs to be held accountable. As for members of this very committee that have gone out of their way, a particular member, to help orchestrate the criminal act of defying a congressional subpoena, and let me address that. This is a standing committee of the United States House of Representatives. It isn't a select partisan hack committee set up by the former speaker that didn't hear anything from the other side of the aisle. Totally different. You can't relate one to the other. And of course, Mr. Jordan was willing to go, would have gone, but just wanted an outline of what the issues were really going to be, never received that. And the reason they didn't hold him in contempt, the reason that they didn't give him the information that they needed, because they knew they were on faulty ground, they knew that they were a partisan hack committee, they knew they didn't want to hear the facts, they knew they didn't want to have the truth. We have the other side of the aisle here. They can challenge, they can have a colloquy, they can go into debate. That didn't exist on that other committee. The purpose of that committee was to hang one individual. But when you think the rule of law is for thee and not for me, Hunter Biden and my colleague from California, those sanctions, they're unsurprising. Americans see the corruption, they feel it. They want Democratic leaders and powerful rich people to be treated like everybody else. The construction worker down the street sees it. The parents who want to speak out at a school board meeting see it. Traditional Catholics who want to worship their Catholicism and the government tries to spy on them sees it. The millions of Americans that were illegally surveyed by FISA, they see it. And if this committee doesn't unanimously today hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress, Democrat leaders will once again show the world their blatant disregard for the rules of this country and the core values that should bind all of us. Justice for thee, but not for me. The rules for thee, but not for me. The powerful, the rich, the Democrat leaders in control. It doesn't apply to them. It only applies to the people they want to get. God help us, I pray for justice and integrity to prevail today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to make a number of points. Number one, it was Merrick Garland, the Democratic Attorney General of the United States, who appointed the special prosecutor who was prosecuting Hunter Biden. So no one can say that we're letting Hunter Biden off. We appointed, or the Justice Department appointed, under Democratic auspices, a special prosecutor. Number one. Number two.
Oh, he can count.
We have never held someone in contempt who is willing to come and testify in public before a committee. The Republican majority on this committee has held 90 private interviews. One has been made public. Selective and misleading quotes have been released from the other 89. Selective and misleading. And they won't make the transcript of the entire interview public because that would show how selective and misleading the quotes are. Number three, let's talk about the real danger faced by this country. 3 years ago, an insurrection was launched against the lawful authority of this country, an insurrection designed to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, the first, in effect, revolution against this country since the Civil War. And it was mounted by Donald Trump. And people were hurt and killed in that attempted revolution, which is what it was. But now we seem to have forgotten it. Or at least the Republicans seem to have forgotten it. And don't forget the testimony right after the president was certified that night. The next day or two, the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, the Republican Minority Leader of the House, Kevin McCarthy, both got up and said that Donald Trump was responsible for what had happened. McConnell said he should be prosecuted. He is being prosecuted. Republicans say that this is a weaponization of the Department of Justice. What nerve? A former president is being prosecuted for crimes committed in front of the entire nation. Everybody saw it. This president, or former president, says that if he is reelected, he wants to be a dictator. He wants to weaponize the Justice Department to prosecute his opponents. He says so. He says he wants to do the things that Republicans are falsely accusing the current Justice Department of doing. He says he wants retribution. I am your retribution. He says he wants the death penalty against the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That is what's really going on in this country. And here we have this committee with a farcical motion to hold Hunter Biden in contempt, even though, as I said, Hunter Biden is willing to testify in front of the committee. No committee has ever held someone in contempt who is willing to testify and says so on any date that the chairman wishes. The hypocrisy here is, I would say it's beyond belief, except the Republicans have shown it repeatedly in this session. If they hadn't, it would be beyond belief. It's unforgivable. It's subversive of freedom in this country. It's subversive of the notion of Republican with a small r government. And the Republicans ought to be ashamed of themselves. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My fellow Americans, Happy New Year. But I've got some sad news.
Oh, this guy.
Despite what some would want you to
He's
believe,
a treat.
this hearing is not about Hunter Biden, a man
We're going to
who is a
bump him up
private
because
citizen,
he really
never
talks
before
slow.
worked for the federal government, much less the executive branch. This hearing, ladies and gentlemen, is about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is president, and MAGA Republicans on this committee still cannot bring themselves
Scott
to
McGinnis?
accept the truth that Trump lost the election. So they made it their single-minded mission to do everything they can to get Donald Trump
Did he get a
reelected.
facelift? He's got like a little
Their game
cut
plan
under his
is to
chin.
impeach Joe Biden and make him a one-term president. And despite a year of an exhaustive joint investigation by this committee and the MAGA House Oversight Committee into Hunter Biden's
MAGA
laptop
Republicans.
and Hunter's $1,300 a month highly suspicious car note
They'll be
reimbursements to his
shit-faced
dad,
within like
House
the
Republicans
first
have come up empty on their crusade
couple
to
hours.
impeach Joe Biden.
Not even.
Perhaps this is
Now
what
that they're
motivated my
going.
good friend and fellow Judiciary Committee member Chip Roy to take to the House floor in a fit of frustration and say, quote, one thing. I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, one, that I can go campaign on and say we did. Anybody sitting in the complex, if you want to come down to the floor and come explain to me one meaningful,
Shifty's making sure
significant
he's
thing
reading the right
the
words
Republican
off the
majority
page
has done,
that's been
and he
pre-printed
proceeded
for
from
him.
there. I'll end that quote right there. But Speaker Johnson is like-minded, saying that impeaching President Biden is a, quote, political imperative, end quote. Speaker Johnson went on to say that, quote, people are getting anxious and they're getting restless, and they just want somebody to be impeached, end quote. So here we are with government funding deadlines to keep the government open,
that's
rapidly
another title.
approaching,
Okay.
with our allies in Ukraine.
So we have to keep a list because there's always a theme. Now they're talking about the government funding is going to run out and we're facing a government shutdown and you're wasting our time with this. That's where they're going.
Requiring urgent assistance,
Part of it.
among a host of other topics requiring congressional action. Republicans are kicking off the new year not by passing legislation that would better the lives of the American people. Instead, MAGA Republicans are kicking off the new year by going
MAGA
after Hunter
Republicans.
Biden for being in violation
Drink.
of a subpoena to appear at a secret, almost clandestine
not.
deposition, excluding the public and the media, after Hunter had offered to come before this committee to answer any and all MAGA questions in a public hearing. And what's so ironic is that Chairman Jordan wants to hold a man in contempt who has offered to appear when the chairman has been in complete violation of his own duly
it
issued
seems
House
like
Committee
you were
subpoena
pretty hot
for
on
the last
that
608
Steve
days.
Bannon last time
Sadly,
when you were in
legislating
control.
is secondary to the MAGA political
MAGA.
agenda of impeaching President Biden. In fact, last year, the MAGA-led House passed only 27 bills.
No, I'm not
This
trying to
House
unalive
held
you.
724 votes, but we couldn't even make 30 laws. That is less lawmaking than any other Congress in the last decade. In fact, last year, MAGA Republicans passed fewer bills than any other Congress since the Great Depression. It's embarrassing and it's shameful, especially when you consider that MAGA Republicans expended 5 weeks last year to elect 2 House speakers, wasting a grand total of 19
Where's the
speaker
ding?
votes.
I need a ding
It was
button.
indeed a painful spectacle. And the dysfunction and gridlock continue into 2024 with only 9 days left before the government runs out of money.
Government shutdown.
Voters did not send us to Washington
Looming.
to pave the way
Why
for
are
the
you
re-election of
wasting our
Donald
time
Trump.
with this?
They sent us to Washington to pass laws that make life better for them. Let's start doing real work on behalf of the American people rather than wasting time catering to Donald Trump. And with that, I yield back.
Oh, boy.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Moran, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, there is really a narrow question presented here today before this committee, and that is, should Hunter Biden be held in contempt of Congress for his failure or refusal to comply with a valid subpoena for deposition? That's it. That's the narrow question
Scott
that's before
McGinnis,
this body today.
government
That's the narrow
shutdown
question that's
looming.
ultimately going to be presented to the whole body
And
of
then
Congress.
you pretty much got the theme.
And this matter is really about a procedural adherence to the law, more so than it is about the underlying substantive issues that we want to talk about.
C-SWAP,
We have a
that's pretty
valid
much it.
and lawful and enforceable subpoena that has been issued to Hunter Biden for a deposition. It regarded a legislative purpose, and that proper subpoena must be complied with. There's no discretion there on behalf of the recipient of
gonna
that
lie,
subpoena
part
to
of
say
this is
when
tit
and
for
how he
tat.
wants to do it. It is by force of law that he must comply with the subpoena. That's point number one. I have two further points. Secondly, this is a matter regarding the acts and omissions of Hunter Biden, not others. I know that many of my colleagues on the other side want to talk about other people and other issues and other things that are irrelevant to this proceeding today. The proceeding, again, is a narrow question about Hunter Biden's acts and omissions as it relates to the subpoena that was issued to him for a deposition. That's it. Responsibility and accountability for decisions has to be individualized in this particular instance. When I was home over the break, I had lots of opportunity to deal with my two young children, my 6 and my 8-year-old. And oftentimes when I deal with them, what I find is when they're having an issue, I go to one and I say, "Why did you do this?" And he wants to point at his sister and say, "Well, she did this." He wants to deflect and talk about his sister's action. I have to respond and remind him, "No, let's talk about your responsibility for your own decisions and the accountability that you're going to have for the decisions that you're making." That's what I feel like when I'm here today listening to some of the arguments on the other side. They want to deflect and say, "Oh, but let's look at somebody else and something else that happened years ago." Well, no, the narrow question is, what did Hunter Biden do or not do in response to the subpoena for testimony and deposition? That's the narrow question here today. The decisions of Hunter Biden have to have consequences. And that leads me to point number 3. Because if this body fails or refuses to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress, future citizens will know that such subpoenas are meaningless. Whether or not they come from a democratically controlled Judiciary Committee or a Republican-controlled Judiciary Committee, they're meaningless. And in that instance, the legislative branch would be without power to effectively compel attendance. We do this over and over again as the Article I branch of government. We cede power to somebody else. We don't want to enforce it when it's tough. We have to hold ourselves accountable, and in this instance, we have to hold a private citizen accountable when they do not respond to a properly and validly issued subpoena. If we do not do that, then for years to come, other people will say, "But Hunter Biden didn't show up. Why should I show up? There will be no consequences. I don't need to do this." Or maybe it's just that because Hunter Biden's daddy is the president, that's the issue, that he knows he's going to get coverage. It's clear to me that Hunter Biden believes he is above the law. This Judiciary Committee today cannot let it go. We have an obligation and a duty to hold this citizen responsible and accountable for his failure or refusal to respond to a valid subpoena for a deposition. Not a hearing before this committee, but a deposition. Any other American under subpoena would be required to attend, and any other American would not get the protection that Hunter Biden is getting in this instance. We must act strongly and stand firm, not just for Republican issuances of subpoenas, but for Democratic issuance of subpoenas in years to come. Because one of these days, the tables are going to be turned, and we must be consistent in the application of our law. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Mr. Schiff,
Mr.
if you
Kentucky
yield
Fried
for a
Chicken.
question first. I guess we're still on your amendment. No?
No,
Was that tabled or the table?
Do you remember when they were impeaching 45 and he
buried
held
the
up
motion
that
to
big
hold Mr.
thing of
Jordan in
chicken?
contempt with one procedural motion, but that wasn't enough to hide it from the public, so they buried the procedural motion in another procedural motion.
Shifty.
Which was buried in a motion to appeal the ruling of the chair, which was tabled, and long and short of it is they didn't want to discuss it, and they moved to a procedural mechanism where they could stop the debate.
Well, the thing is, that what they were, problem was they said that
I can't
the
see his
subpoena to
face
Mr.
without
Jordan
remembering him with
was in
that
the
big
last
thing of
Congress, and
Kentucky
therefore
Fried
it's
Chicken.
been, statute of limitations
Acting a
is run.
fool.
But
A
what it
fool,
really
I tell ya.
is about chutzpah, which in English, of course, is hypocrisy. But it's both chutzpah and hypocrisy, that Mr. Jordan would have to ask that a subpoena failure to comply be cited for contempt when he did the same thing.
Again, I find this just very
Chutzpah has no
rich,
statute of limitations.
considering the
Would
fact
you
that the
entertain
4
another
years
amendment
preceding
that finds him guilty of chutzpah?
the garbage I had to sit and
I would
suffer
certainly
through.
be willing to modify my motion to simply hold him in contempt
For
and not
4
Hunter
years.
Biden, if that were desired by the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff. There's some things that have been said today.
I don't think that is desired by the committee.
Some things have been said today that I'd like to. Mr. Van Drew said that the January 6th committee just wanted to hang one person. No, it was hang Mike Pence. That's what they said on January 6th, not hang somebody else, individual one. And so I think he got confused in who was to be hung. And Ms. Jayapal did a pretty good job of talking about what they failed to do, but you forgot today is an historic day. Today is a day like none other in the history of the Congress of the United States of America. The Republicans are getting us a new pin. Today we're getting a new pin. Never before have we had 2 pins in one Congress. This is the 2-pin Congress. They didn't like green.
Will the gentleman yield as to the pin?
No, sir. Maybe it's the wicked that they don't like the connection with the play, which was green, and it gave green a good name. We're getting a new pin. Yeah, we're getting a new pin. But the fact is, this is not about Hunter Biden. This is not about subpoenas. This is about Joe Biden, and it's about this committee and much of the Republican Congress trying to reelect Donald Trump, who has 91 indictments.
Oh, yes, 91.
Sightings and indictments. 2 impeachments.
Oh, yeah.
God knows how many lies.
Oh, God knows
And,
how many lies.
They want to help get him back in power, who he says he'll be the dictator just on day 1. And on day 1,
So
of
how
course,
come
what
you-
he'll do is he'll
how
declare
come you
a
fight
national
so hard during
emergency
his 4
and a
years to get
national
him out?
situation where he'll empower the military and
How come
come
you're
under
trying
his
to
command
remove him from the
to
ballot?
go after people and arrest people and to do things
What
that
are you
never been
afraid
done in
of,
America
Mr. Cohen?
that will be a dictatorship that he will announce on day 1 and will continue through his term. But he's not going to be elected because the American people are not capable or willing to be conned by the #1 con man that this nation has ever known. He has conned many of his supporters. And I read on January 6th on responses to emails or to social media sightings that that group believes that it was Antifa and the FBI that led the assault on January 6th. They had masks on to make them appear to be MAGA. I guess the Antifa and the, which is not a Democratic group, it's some kind of group out there, Antifa, they're liberal.
Lynn Dalton, I'm sure the peeps sitting in prison for being escorted through the Capitol find him really funny. Actually, I saw a clip of Representative Clay Higgins with Tucker Carlson, just a clip of it I saw last night, and I've been meaning to watch the whole entire thing. But Clay Higgins brings up a good point. Even people that work in the Capitol building have a hard time finding the Speaker's office. There's a reason that people that tour the Capitol, or people that tour the Capitol, need a tour guide. That place is impossible to find. So the fact that those doors were open and people were led to the Speaker's house to sit behind the desk, you're telling me like they couldn't find that with a map and a compass if they had it. They were obviously guided there.
But they're not Democrat.
I want to see
And,
that Tucker Carlson
the
thing.
the
Maybe I'll do a
FBI
rewatch of that
got
tomorrow.
involved in the insurrection and urged it on and were responsible for it.
I
and
think
it was
it's
all
on
false flag.
X, maybe.
And these people believe it. They have bought one of the biggest lies ever propounded or promoted by an American president.
And actually, one of the subcommittee hearings, like in November, that Clay Higgins is on, he has pictures of the buses, and I think I forget now who he was talking to. It might have been Merrick Garland's hearing. And he's like, "Sir, who were in these buses?" And of course, the other side objects and gets shot down. I think I have that clip on my YouTube channel and Rumble channel.
And the president continues to do it, to talk about the election. And there were people in this Congress who supported overturning the election. I think 140 people on the Republican side voted to not accept the Electoral College votes of Arizona and or Pennsylvania. It's scary what's happened, and this is part of it. This is a continuation of rewriting history and making people out there who apparently didn't go to the colleges that have the presidents that Ms. Stefanik is trying to remove. Anyway, this is chutzpah.
He's trying to act
And I
sincere
yield
and
back
he's
to
full of
Valerie.
hooey.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Sparks, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Her. Listen to her.
I want to make a couple
She's
brief
good.
remarks on
Hi,
some of the
KLI.
issues that were brought up from other side and then kind of get to the subject. No, honestly, I agree. Last Congress, the other side passed a lot of very bad bills. I don't think quantity of bills is a good legislation and actually wasted a lot of money. And unfortunately, they had control on the whole houses and presidency and were able to do a lot of bad legislation and not dealing with real issues affecting Americans, crushing debt, inflation, and the spending and, and what's happening in our border is very destructive for our country. And they don't want to do, and they don't even want to find bipartisan agreement on these issues, this Congress, which is very sad for me to see. I know there is a lot of discussions about, January 6th, and I've been in the chamber January 6th, and I'll tell you something, we call this insurrection. I'll have to tell you, if the people that show up there wanted to do it, they would have succeeded, but they didn't show up for that reason. It was people that were upset because the quality of people came there. They were mad because we are not governing for the people. And that's unfortunately what was very strange to me, that Speaker Pelosi didn't have a security. Speaker Pelosi insisted for us to stay in the chamber, but I personally demanded to leave that chamber. So a lot of things, the other side dropped the ball. And it was very unfortunate for me to see that. So I think this is beyond the subject of this matter, but we need to stop, accusing people that disagree with the government that been very corrupt and oppressive, to actually come here and, express peacefully their dissatisfaction. And there are always some bad players, and who knows who they are. But we don't call all people insurrectionists. This is just un-American to do it, and I'm sick and tired of the other side constantly doing it, because I knew a lot of people that were there in the crowd, and they're good Americans, patriotic, that love this country. But go further. I know that maybe, Chairman Issa said it might be a waste of time, and Hunter Biden is going to invoke the Fifth Amendment. But you know what? What he's doing right now, beyond that, it is a blatant disregard of congressional subpoena. That's how he does. He actually dares enough. No other American would show up actually in the face, of Congress and defy and say, I'm going to decide how things are going to happen. This is just disrespectful. Only someone who thinks a little too much of himself would go actually do something. People might disagree, fighting in the courts, but not in the face. As Representative Bishop said, that is actually extremely disrespectful to this institution to do what he is doing. And if we look at the matter of the fact, we can debate and try, to get attention to other issues and deliberate, but ultimately, I think that should be, and Representative Moran said that is setting up a very bad precedent. If the other side decide, that, somebody can just act like that with the Congress, they might shoot themselves in the foot, because next Congress, there could be something different, and they will be on the other side, because we're setting up a precedent, but somebody's going to decide if they're going to comply or not of the deposition subpoena. And I don't think this institution, should allow that happen. If this is a very serious impeachment inquiry, if Hunter Biden wants to explain what's happened, he has a chance to come. And it's not like in a deposition you have just one side. You have both sides, equal amount of time. Everything can be questioned. So it's a very bipartisan process, but not a 5-minute presentation that will just go until he do just here for 5 minutes talking points with his lawyers. And it's not going to really get to the subject matter, because subject matter at stake, it's extremely serious. I think we should start taking actually impeachment inquiries and proceedings much more seriously than the other side did. It's not a politics, it's not a joke. We're a serious institution, and I do not think people think that way here now, and it's unfortunately what we became a circus, entertainment, and talking points, and not really looking at issues seriously. It's sad for me to see, and I think this is a reflection, on where we are heading as a republic, and it's a sad reality. But we have to decide, are we going to be adults in the room instead of looking at the issues, or we're just going to do presentations here? So I think if we go to the narrow matter of the discussion, do we allow anyone to defy the congressional subpoena? And the other sides will have to make a decision how they're going to vote for that. But they might regret that they're doing politics right now. So I hope they will rethink this and support in this resolution. So I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff is recognized. Then we'll go to Ms. Wright.
Mr. Chairman, once again, we hear an effort to reinvent January 6th, this time as people expressing peacefully their disagreements with the government. January 6th was not a peaceful expression of differences with the government. It was a massive, violent attack on the Capitol with the effort to...
Scott McGinnis, she often reflects on growing up in the Ukraine, and that's why she's so passionate about keeping America the, free constitutional republic it was designed. There's a couple other ones that are on the committee that are, originally immigrants, and they too, they know what it's like to live under dictatorships.
With the object of overturning a free and fair election. Mr. Jordan cut off debate on my amendment to hold him in contempt, so we couldn't discuss what his role was, why he was subpoenaed, and whether he should be held to the same standard as a private citizen. And while he said quite erroneously that he was
citizen that you keep throwing in jail?
Not required to testify, either because he took issue with the object of the investigation or because the speech and debate clause, as Representative Lofgren pointed out, that does not apply to subpoenaing a member of this body. Let's remember who did step forward, and let's ask ourselves not why he was compelled and refused, but why he didn't volunteer to come forward, why he was unwilling to share his information, why it was even necessary to subpoena him. After all, so many others did their constitutional duty.
Why don't you tell us,
Republican
Shifty?
Speaker in Arizona, Rusty Bowers, talked about how he was compelled by his oath, by his faith, by the Constitution, to do his constitutional duty, to refuse the former president's entreaties to overturn the election. And he showed his devotion to our country and the Constitution by coming and testifying. Jim Jordan would not. Brad Raffensperger, the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, did his constitutional duty both to protect the vote in Georgia, to ignore the former president's demands that he find 11,780 votes that didn't exist, but also to come and testify, to share with the country what he knew, but not Jim Jordan. Cassidy Hutchinson, a staff member at the White House, showed extraordinary courage to come forward, showed her devotion to her country and Constitution, and came forward and testified, but not Jim Jordan. Capitol Police officers who were beaten and gouged that day, they came forward and testified, but not Jim Jordan. White House counsel, Republican White House counsel came forward and testified, but not Jim Jordan. Unless we forget why the committee wanted Jim Jordan, let's look at our referral to the Ethics Committee over his failure to come forward for a guide as to why we wanted his testimony. Representative Jordan was a significant player in President Trump's efforts, we wrote. He participated in numerous post-election meetings in which senior White House officials, Rudy Giuliani and others, discussed strategies for challenging the election. Chief among them claims that the election had been tainted by fraud. On January 2nd, 2021, Representative Jordan led a conference call in which he, President Trump, and other members of Congress discussed strategies for delaying the January 6th joint session. During that call, the group also discussed issuing social media posts encouraging President Trump's supporters to march to the Capitol on January 6th. An hour and a half later, President Trump and Representative Jordan spoke by phone for 18 minutes. Yes, we wanted him to come testify about what he discussed with President Trump for 18 minutes.
More funny.
And no, Jim Jordan has never told this body why he was unwilling to tell the country about that conversation in the run-up to a violent attack on the U.S. Capitol. Or why he spoke with White House staff about, as we wrote, the prospect of presidential pardons for members of Congress. He was unwilling to say why he thought pardons for members of Congress might be necessary. And today, he's unwilling to tell us why there should be a different standard for a member of Congress who is subpoenaed than for a private citizen, and why the standard for a private citizen should be so much higher. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle say that's not a germane question. We love to hide behind germaneness when we really don't want to answer the root of the matter. And the root of the matter is, why is Hunter Biden's failure to appear worthy of a criminal contempt, but the chairman of the Judiciary Committee's unwillingness to comply with a congressional subpoena gets nothing more than a shrug? That's really the question before this committee today. And so far, there is no answer. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I love following my colleagues from California because it gives me so many more things to talk about. You know, Congressman Schiff, you and I came into Congress together almost 24 years ago. We've seen a lot. We've seen a lot in this committee. But whenever I'm in a markup and one side wants to talk about something that's not on the table and the other side says, well, why don't we talk about what's on the table, the whole thing gets lost. Well, I want to bring it back to what is really at stake here. This committee has subpoenaed an individual in which there is a substantial amount of information related to the wrongdoing of not just himself, but potentially the President of the United States, the then Vice President of the United States. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an investigation of the then Vice President of the United States and his son, who had special access, who flew on Air Force Two, who today had the committee room next to us swept so he could come in and make a little staged appearance. We're not dealing with a private individual, as my colleague from California said. He's not a private individual. He is the son of the president. He is a man who has flown around the world using his last name being his father's last name, to make millions of dollars, much of which he hid from the IRS and didn't pay his taxes on. That's who we're asking to come
that little
in a private session, not a staged public event, and answer questions if he will. As a gentlelady from Indiana said, Ms. Sparks, I said he might or probably would take the fifth. He hasn't said he'd take the fifth. That would be an assertion that his people could make, and that the chairman would look at that. What he has done is simply thumbed his nose at the American people and at this body. It's that simple. It has nothing to do with what went on in the last Congress. It has nothing to do with what went on years ago in the election of President Biden. And yet one side would have you hear about Jim Jordan not showing up for a committee that he sent letters back to telling him why he needed to know things and he wanted to negotiate his appearance, which is not uncommon for any witness, particularly a member of Congress, asked about his private conversations between him and the President of the United States. We all know the President of the United States has an absolute right to ask for and receive information in confidence, and we have been told for years on both sides of the aisle that we do not have access to that correspondence related to decision-making of a president. And yet we're acting like they're the equivalent of somebody who has committed crimes, Hunter Biden, who has used his position as the son of the president to fly to China, make business deals, and then fly home with daddy on Air Force Two. We are clearly looking at somebody who has done wrong, has used his family name to do wrong, but more importantly, we are looking at whether or not there was a connection in funds flowing to the president and or the president, then vice president, taking action as a result of funds flowing to he or other family members. It's that simple. We are doing a serious investigation of real wrongdoing, and an individual who has done wrongdoing, no question about it, is refusing to come, but has the, as the congressman who's no longer here from Tennessee says, he has the chutzpah to show up in the committee room next door or use the Secret Service to do so, just as before the break, he showed up across the Capitol using Congressman Swalwell's name to get himself a place to have a staged press conference. Well, we sat in this room waiting for him to show up, all the court reporters, the chairman, the ranking members doing their job because we expected him to show up as subpoenaed for a deposition. So let's get back to the basics. This is a contempt because he has been contemptible of not just not showing up, but how he has thwarted and given us the middle finger, if you will, to the American people.
Lefty,
and when somebody
I'm towing
flips
a
the
tight
bird
line
to the
over
American
here on
people
YouTube.
or the United States
Sometimes I
Congress
forget now
or to the
I'm
power
over there
of
with us.
legitimate government actions, yes, that's what referral for contempt to the federal court should be, and I insist on it. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
Got quite a few things to respond
this
to.
guy
I want to
guy's
start it with
insane,
the
too.
comment from the gentlelady from
Okay,
I think
we'll
it's
see you back,
Indiana,
C-Swept.
regarding the peaceful
Thanks for
nonviolent
stopping in
protest on
again.
January 6th. The irony of that for me is, you know, I grew up during the civil rights movement. Dr. King's birthday is one that we celebrate, you know, civil rights movement, because that's what a nonviolent protest looks
Who
like.
doesn't love
Dr. King didn't show up with bear spray.
Dr. King?
He didn't show up with any kind of weapons. He didn't break
Every
into any
year
kind
I
of
have
locked
my kids
buildings.
watch-
He
listen
didn't do
to his
anything like that.
speech.
If there was any kind of
What they
Bull
did to
Connor
him.
and the like. Next,
To try to
I'd like to say
suppress what
this.
he
The
had to say,
Republicans
so
keep
that's
saying,
kind of a
you know,
joke, Mr. Ivey,
we want
sorta.
to try and get this information. It's important. President Biden is, you know, under investigation. Mr. Issa just referenced the meeting. We were sitting, I think it was the next room, waiting for Hunter Biden to show up. Well, A, that's incorrect because he said he wasn't coming for the deposition. But if they decided, you know what, we can do a hearing right now. They had the court reporter there. We're in a hearing room.
Daryl
Let's just,
Issa?
the members just come up to the dais and give them a
He
chance
took
to move off of this hardline position about it's got to be a deposition. It can't be public testimony. We could do it now. We could do it now. So the problem when you start talking about contempt, by the way, this is criminal contempt. This is, you're saying that he's got the intent to deny this committee information that it's seeking. And all the cases you cite in your report go to that point. But he's not
It is
denying the
frustrating 'cause
information. In
we've known
fact,
about
in
this for,
contrast
what,
to some
4
of the
or
other
5
folks we
years?
talked about, Navarro and Bannon and the like, they stonewalled it. He has not. He has not. And the last point I'll make, and I'll give you some time if I can, with respect to the chairman's responses with respect to the select committee subpoena. And I think it's a fair point that the congressman from California made. You know, Mr. Chairman, you could have testified if you wanted. In fact, if you'd met the Hunter Biden standard, you could have publicly testified, just like he's offered to do. And by the way, it's not too late. You know, if you want to make that happen, we can do that, I'm sure. But the other point I want to make is this. One of the things the chairman did in sending a letter back to the select committee was he put conditions on him coming to testify. Conditions that he would never permit witnesses now to assert. For example, he requested material from the select committee, including all materials referencing him in the select committee's possession, and all internal legal analysis related to the constitutionality of the members' subpoenas. If the members, I don't even know how many compliance hearings we've had with respect to Department of Justice, but if they'd made that assertion, you would have to peel these guys off the ceiling. And by the way, we've got members demanding DOJ line employees and other line employees at the government level, having them come in to testify, which is unprecedented, by the way, especially in the middle of a criminal investigation. You're bringing line prosecutors in here and compelling them to testify, or even asking them to testify, in the middle of a criminal investigation, and they're complying with you. By the way, I've told them I disagree with that position. I think they should just outright say no, because that's what you did, that's what the Republicans did, and that's what the previous executive branch administrations have done. They've asserted privileges that the Biden administration has not. And yet here we are. You're going after, and he's not a public figure, not a public official, by the way. Hunter Biden's a private citizen, which distinguishes him from all the executive branch cases that are referenced in your report. He's a different person. He's offered to come in and testify. He's a private citizen who does it and doesn't have to do it. And there's absolutely no reason we should hold him in criminal contempt. With that, I yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And just to distinguish my California colleague's argument that Jim Jordan didn't have to appear because there's some executive privilege covering his conversations with Donald Trump.
Time? Aren't you supposed to ask?
Much as I respect my colleague, legally, that's nonsense. The executive privilege applies within the executive. A president can't say to a member of Congress, you can't describe my conversation that I had with you. And in fact, even within the executive,
He's such a liar.
We had the testimony of White House counsel and other close advisors of the president's have been testifying before the grand jury because the courts have rejected that argument where the president was engaged in potential criminality.
At him like he did to you for the last 4 years.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes. Would the gentleman yield for just a second?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Just in response to Mr. Ivey, the reason I sent the 11-page letter to Mr. Thompson that haven't received a response from was because asking for the reasoning and the analysis on the subpoena was because he had said so. He said, we're studying the matter. We're not sure we can do it. There was doubt there, so we said, well, provide us what, because now you've changed your position, you've issued the subpoena, so we just asked for that. We've yet to receive that. But that's why we did it, because the chairman actually said that.
With the gentleman,
the gentleman from Virginia.
It's his gentleman from Virginia's time.
I thank the chairman,
previous
and
two
that was going to be my
congressional
first
terms.
request, is that your letter of June
Realize what a
9th
hypocrite
be
they are.
inserted for the record.
Without objections, it'd be entered in.
And let's run down that timeline, because
And
we
on
were first
top of it,
approached in late 2021.
Since we've had the majority in the House the last, year, close to a year, the GOP isn't nearly as fierce with them as they were the preceding 4 years. It's kind of frustrating.
About appearing before the January 6th committee. You responded on January 9th, 2022, stating that you had no relevant information would assist, but wrote that any information you could provide would relate to performance of official duties. May 12th, Chairman Thompson subpoenaed you. May 25th, you requested information and materials from the committee. May 31st, Chairman Thompson widened the scope of information sought. June 9th, you responded again. So the last communication was you responding, trying to negotiate the appearance before the committee. Mr. Ivey has been an attorney in private practice. I've been an attorney in private practice, representing clients in receipt of subpoenas, and also a prosecutor actually issuing subpoenas. And there's a thing called reasonable accommodation, which I know my friend is familiar with, where you try to reach an agreement about how that person will comply with the subpoena. And I'm not going to yield at this point, but I will say that this is very different than what we've seen from Mr. Biden. And Mr. Ivey sits on the subcommittee that I chair, Responsiveness and Accountability to Oversight. We've been charged with trying to encourage responsiveness instead of stonewalling, to consistently requests for information from this committee being ignored by this administration. So the idea that somehow the son of the president is doing something that is different than the administration is actually not that unusual. But what we have here is continued stonewalling by Mr. Biden. On December 7th, we issued the committees issued a joint deposition notice for him to appear on December 13th, and he didn't appear for his deposition. The last communication was actually not from Mr. Biden asking for more information. Mr. Lowell did send a letter on December 6th, but that the committee actually responded that day, the same day, reiterating that the subpoenas do not provide Mr. Biden a choice to make, and rather the subpoenas compel him to appear for a deposition. And let's talk about which committees we're talking about here. This is, again, a standing committee of the House of Representatives, the Judiciary Committee, as opposed to the January 6th committee, which even the chairman himself actually was quoted as saying, I think there are some questions as to whether we have.
Pause 1 moment. Yeah, so tomorrow, 9 a.m. my time, so 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is also this committee, the House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, and it's about impact of illegal immigration on social services. So I'll be doing that one also. I thought there was another one too. There's one on the Uyghurs. Oh, this one. Shoot, it's at the same time. They're double dipping again. This is the other one I wanted to do. Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs hearing. It is risks of progressive ideologies in the U.S. military. So that one I'll do tomorrow also. I just have to figure out which one I'll do first and which one I'll do second. So those two. I'll make a note here. So illegal immigration on social services tomorrow, and national security, border, and foreign, risks of progressive ideologies in the U.S. military. Those two tomorrow. See?
Have the authority
these
to
are
subpoena
interesting,
colleagues.
in my opinion.
We're looking at it, and they never actually arrived at a conclusion as to whether that was allowable under the rules and challenged by many of my colleagues. So the chairman of this committee never declined to testify, whereas Mr. Biden seems to want to violate all norms and procedures of proper subpoena procedure and compliance and reasonable accommodation, and dictate to this committee the time and place and manner in which he will appear. Instead of making appearances down the hall at oversight committee hearings to thumb his nose, instead of somehow cooperating with members of the minority to arrange for press conferences on Capitol grounds, can you imagine if Mr. Bobulinski had done that? What the minority would do if those who January 6th were seeking testimony from and who did not comply actually held press conferences on the Capitol grounds or came to adjoining committees to sit and smile at the members of the committee while they tried to get information. Heads would explode on that side of the aisle. So with that, I urge my colleagues to support this motion. It is time to get compliance with this committee's responsibility for oversight, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. Liu, is recognized.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Last term, when Democrats were in control, we passed a number of laws to move the American family forward. We passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that created a lot of good-paying jobs. We passed the Bipartisan PACT Act that helped our nation's veterans. We passed the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act that brought chip manufacturing back to the United States and created even more good-paying jobs. This term, under Republican control, what do we have? We have impeachments and expulsions and contempt proceedings because Republicans have no agenda. Under Democrats, we created a record number of jobs last year. We had GDP growth above expectations, unemployment at a 50-year low, and the stock market reaching record highs. And what are we doing here this week? Not one, but two hearings under Republican control on Hunter Biden. I can guarantee you, no American family over the holidays was sitting around the kitchen table thinking, gosh, that Hunter Biden, he's willing to testify publicly under oath in front of Congress, but he won't do a closed-door deposition. We really got to hold him in contempt. No American family was thinking that. None of this helps move the American family forward. And the reason we have not one but two committee hearings doing this today is because Republicans have no agenda. We are 9 days away from a government shutdown.
See, there's
are we
the other
doing a
theme.
single
So we got
appropriations
three
hearing on the
themes
floor this
going.
week? No. Instead, what we got this year was we had the Republicans bring us to the brink of not one, not two, but now 3 potential government shutdowns. We had a Republican majority bring us to the brink of a catastrophic default on our nation's debts. And we had the Republican majority taking out their own speaker. We have chaos on the other side, and because they can't agree on anything, they're doing these stupid proceedings. And it's particularly stupid because Hunter Biden showed up today to testify publicly under oath. Why are the Republicans scared to let him testify publicly? What are Republicans hiding from American people? What don't they want Hunter Biden to say publicly? Ask yourself that question. And let me make one more point.
Well, I know he
None of
shows
this
up.
is going to matter because
guess
Hunter
I'm
Biden
confused as to
substantially
how that
complied with the
transpired.
subpoena. The subpoena said, we want your testimony. You said, okay, I will come to you at a time and place that you choose. I just won't do a closed-door deposition, but I'll come to a time and place here in this committee room and testify publicly under oath. That is substantial compliance. That means the Department of Justice is never going to enforce this subpoena. So we're spending all this time wasting taxpayers' money when we should be focused instead. How do we move the American family forward? How do we lower costs, create more jobs, and increase GDP growth? That's what Democrats want to work on. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, for 5 minutes.
Oh, Mr. Big
Thank you,
switch
Mr. Chairman.
spaces.
You know, the question's come up numerous times. Why won't Why won't he sit for a closed-door deposition, which was brought up by my colleague, Mr. Bishop, earlier? I mean, I'm not sure what the issue is. Why won't he sit for a deposition? I think he's just...
Would the gentleman yield for an answer to that question?
I don't yield right now.
Interrupt.
Mr. Fitzgerald controls the time.
I'm not sure why, but I'm sure it's the barrage of questions that, quite honestly, would probably incriminate him. My colleague, Mr. Ivey, earlier talked about being a private citizen. And you know, the problem is that Hunter Biden has a business card, right? And I'm not sure how many business cards
What
he
about
has.
that firearm he threw in the
But
garbage?
I think most of them would simply say the president's son, right? I mean, that's clearly what he's doing. I mean, if he's down the hallway today in oversight, willing to sit in the back row and smile at the members of Congress to defy, obviously, the subpoena, he still hasn't found a job like he was asked about by a judge much earlier in the year, last year. So
what about that white
it's
powdery
straightforward
substance that tested
that
positive
the president's
for
son
cocaine
not only
in the
defied a
White
legally
House?
issued subpoena,
In that
but both House
locker.
and committee rules make it crystal
Whatever
clear,
happened to
as many of
that?
my colleagues have said before, that we have subpoena authority, which was communicated on multiple occasions to the president's son and his counsel. His decision to ignore the deposition subpoenas in favor of a public hearing, it doesn't somehow absolve him from the constitutional mandated duty to comply. So there's been a lot of discussion about other items, I think, here today, but let's go back to the bottom line, and that is that he is under a subpoena by the U.S. House of Representatives to sit and comply with the subpoena. It's not a suggestion. It does not deserve special treatment. It is what it is. But more than that, his refusal to testify seems to support the notion that, you know, he doesn't want to incriminate himself, which, you know, I understand. Then simply take the fifth.
Yep.
Again, Mr. Bishop discussed this earlier. Is this simply kind of a charade in front of Congress to ultimately say, okay, I'd be willing to come in and sit? We don't know what he would say in a public hearing either. But this committee, Judiciary Committee, not only has the wherewithal, but the responsibility to take this seriously. We know through public record requests and the depositions of business associates and government officials that foreign money was received by the president's son and the Biden family, and that those payments led to favors or special treatment by the President of the United States, and that large, quote-unquote, reimbursement checks were issued to President Biden shortly after that. We all know through testimony from the president's son
Well, lefties over on Rumble, too.
and his business associate, Devin Archer, that President Biden was at the center of this family's business dealings. Mr. Archer put it, quote-unquote, the brand. He was on speakerphone with his son approximately 20 times. He was allegedly sitting with his son when Hunter Biden pressured a Chinese energy company, and he received 10% for his troubles. It's a joke. It's on T-shirts. You board any airplane in America right now, and it says 10% for the big guy. Further, it appears that foreign nationals sought to influence public officials through their family members. This presents legal and ethical questions that need to be answered. And the president's son is afraid that a closed-door deposition may support some of these accusations. That's what's going on.
I've got laptop
I don't
from
think
Hell by
anybody's
Miranda
being
Devine
fooled
also
by the
on my
discussion that's
Rumble
happening
channel,
here today.
The audiobook.
So I just reiterate my support for the idea that we should continue to press to get the president's son in a deposition setting and get to the bottom of this so that the people of the United States of America understand that their president is not part of this. Unfortunately, I think he is. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Vermont, Ms. Balin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. My constituents asked me.
I need to make a list because I've got so many audiobooks for those of you who are fans of political audiobooks on the Rumble channel. Miranda Devine's Laptop from Hell is one. Mark Levin's American Marxism is another. Glenn Beck's The Great Reset, and then also his brand new one, Dark Future, is on there. I started doing the brand new Mark Levin book, The Democrat Party Hates America, but I think I only got like 3 chapters, and then I took a little break, and then I did the Zach Anderson trial. So I got to get back up to putting that. But I have a lot of books. I got a Peter Schweitzer. I'm pretty sure Secret Empires is on there. That one's got a chapter about Jared Kushner and the Bidens, of course, and Mitch McConnell and his wife, the shipping magnate or whatever they call that. So
all the time. You know,
I'll have to
what's
make a
the
list.
most difficult part of serving in Congress? And for me, it is confronting the deep cynicism. This hearing is not about transparency. It's not about accountability. You know, our committee has conducted 90 interviews or depositions as Congress, and to date, the chairman has released exactly one transcript. The one transcript that was released after we, Democrats, complained and asked him to release it to the Judiciary Committee in a hearing. The chairman won't let Hunter Biden testify publicly, and he hasn't been releasing the transcripts of interviews that have taken place. The public, as my colleague said, regular people deserve to know what this committee has been doing this Congress. I agree. The public, regular people, should see that in interview after interview, Republicans advance conspiracy theories wholly unsupported by evidence. Instead, the chairman continues to call witnesses behind closed doors, and I fear that's because the facts don't support the allegations. That the evidence would actually show that Republicans put forward claims that are baseless and false. So let's talk more about those real people, those regular people who send us here to do work on their behalf. Not only are the chairman's investigations a cynical waste of time, but they have put the lives of regular people in danger. Witnesses that have appeared before this committee have testified that House Republicans have spread dangerous conspiracy theories about them, and it has led to threats against their families and against them. Regular people, regular Americans. For instance, after Chairman Jordan posted an edited video of her on Twitter, one witness who was 9 months pregnant at the time had to get a restraining order against a man who repeatedly doxed her family. She had to disguise herself to go to prenatal visits because of the stalking and of the tens of thousands of death threats that she experienced. She ended up having to hire a private security firm that recommended that she not leave home. Witnesses who are members of law enforcement have testified that they've been doxxed, that they have gotten threats not just at work, but at their homes as well. And beyond that, witnesses have described threats to their families and to their children. They've described threatening letters being sent to their family members and having to move houses because their addresses have been posted online. Many of the 90 interviews that the committee has conducted this Congress have been with ordinary Americans, regular people who are just trying to do their jobs. Republican investigations this Congress have jeopardized the health and the safety of everyday Americans, regular people, the people who sent us here to do work on their behalf. This committee appears to be more interested in advancing conspiracy theories than in doing our jobs, serving the people we represent, those regular people. The posturing here in this committee is rooted in a deep, dangerous cynicism, a cynicism that threatens our very democracy, and it is very hard to watch. I yield back.
Lady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I agree with Mr. Liu and other Democrats who've spoken today that it was a tragedy that we lost many months of productive work because of the chaos created by the removal of the Speaker. But I would remind them that the Republican majority didn't remove the Speaker. Every single Democrat in the House, joined by just 8 Republicans, removed the Speaker. And under that Speaker, this House had passed landmark legislation.
When I went downstairs, stirred the chili, the kids are watching, I guess Gypsy Rose was on an interview, like an hour-ish interview. Mom, I'm watching. Did you hear that Gypsy Rose was on for an interview? I'm like, what? You're not watching the Contempt of Congress? Hunter Biden hearing I'm live streaming? It's kind of funny.
To secure our borders, unleash American energy.
Okay, Farrell, drive safely. 10 and 2.
And cut hundreds of billions of dollars of red tape. And to his
thanks
argument
for
that the
listening.
economy is doing just great
Farrell
because of this
housewife has now gone into Fraser Crane mode.
Here's the one question they fear the most. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Everybody knows the answer to that question in their own lives, and they will vote accordingly. And that obviously terrifies the Democrats, and it should. But all of that's irrelevant to the question before us today. The question before us today was perhaps best expressed just the other day by President Biden himself. On January 5th, the president attacked those who he said, quote, traffic in lies told for power and profit, and who are driven by grievance and grift. Well, we're here because of concern that for many years, The president has been doing exactly that through a complex family influence peddling scheme. These concerns are backed by a growing trove of documentation, emails, testimony of associates, bank records, FBI informants that paint a troubling picture of a family influence peddling operation over many years in which the central feature was access to Joe Biden, involving millions of dollars of payments to family members and perhaps to Biden himself. Now, Joe Biden clearly, unequivocally, and forcefully has maintained that he had nothing to do with that operation. He never spoke to his family about it. So what is so hard for the family member who collected all of these millions of dollars of foreign payments at the center of all of this to come here and say so? The only answer I can think of is that Mr. Biden has been telling lies for power and profit, driven by grievance and grift. I hope there's another answer that would exonerate the president. And I would think that he, above all, would want to put those suspicions to rest.
Oh my God.
If there's nothing to these
I know some people don't like
just
Glenn
say
Beck,
so.
but he's got some really
How hard is
great
that?
Wednesday
And if there
night
is something
specials
to
about
these
the Biden
suspicions, the
crime
Fifth
family.
Amendment rightly protects all Americans from being compelled to provide self-incriminating testimony. That might be embarrassing, but no further information can be compelled. Instead, he's chosen to thumb his nose at the lawful subpoena of Congress, a subpoena that presents no questions as far as its legitimacy or constitutionality. And that act is contemptible, and it is criminal, and it cannot be allowed to stand. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
I had to go get some lavender oil.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves a point of order.
Namaste.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee report for the resolution recommending that the House of
Amendment is will be considered as
Did everybody
read.
grab
The
their
gentlelady
crochet?
is, while we're waiting to get the amendment, but the gentlelady may begin.
I'm about halfway through my blue
explaining her
hat
amendment.
now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just returned from the Homeland Security Committee, and I again want to assert the comments of my ranking member, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that maybe in the interim you would correct that procedural
That was the one we already watched.
injustice, if you will. I don't believe that there's any facts basis for Secretary Marcus to be impeached, but certainly the actions should be retained of impeachment by this Judiciary Committee. I wanted that to be on the record. As I said, there's an amendment at the desk, Jackson Lee, and my amendment notes that the House Republicans are continuing to harp on an investigation that has produced no evidence of wrongdoing. Specifically,
Oh,
my
did I
amendment
drop again?
will do the following. On page 7, strike the sentence that reads, information held and known to Mr. Biden is vital to the impeachment inquiry of President Biden and the committee's ongoing efforts to craft legislative reforms to federal ethics and financial disclosure laws. On page 7, after the sentence that begins throughout 2023, insert the following. Congressional Republicans have received dozens of hours of testimony from government officials and former Hunter Biden business partners and obtained troves of documents in response to their requests. This includes more than 37,000 pages of bank records, including personal bank accounts of Biden family members and other private citizens produced by 9 different banks. In addition, the Biden-Harris administration has cooperated extensively with congressional Republicans' probe. This comes on top of evidence collected by Senators Johnson and Grassley as part of their 2020 investigation into Hunter Biden. Instead of focusing on passing meaningful legislation or
Oh, man. I don't understand what is going on. This happened earlier. Where are we at here? 223.54. I don't get it. Just a moment. Let me open up a different browser window. This did it earlier too. I noticed there was an update on my computer last night. And then there was an update after the first hearing where we had like a hiccup. And now it's like cut off again. Oh, the light is blue. I moved the router so it's far away so it wouldn't get any interception. The heck, man. Okay, it says it's still going. Just a moment. I don't know what that is. I know yesterday a couple of the YouTube live streams I was watching. Now I gotta find it again. People were saying, oh, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. And I said, oh, well, just like close your browser window and open it up again and it'll work. That's been almost a week now. Like all of a sudden it'll get glitchy and then House, Judiciary, GOP. It'll get glitchy and then if you refresh it. So I don't know. And I had that problem last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, where it's like, you don't have an internet connection on YouTube. But then I go over to like Rumble, and there I am talking with the YouTube telling me that I didn't have a connection. I don't know. It's not the computer, so it's either my router or something. Okay, what were we at? 223.50. I don't know what this is. 223.50. At least I wrote it down. 223 there. I don't know. Spinning again. It's very frustrating. Spinning again. Still spinning.
This Judiciary Committee, I wanted that to be on the
I'm ready to
record.
say, screw it.
As I said, there's an amendment at the desk, Jackson Lee, and my amendment notes that the House Republicans are continuing to harp on an investigation that has produced no evidence of wrongdoing. Specifically, my amendment will do the following. On page 7, strike the sentence that reads, information held and known to Mr. Biden is vital to the impeachment inquiry of President Biden and the committee's ongoing efforts to craft legislative reforms to federal ethics and financial disclosure laws. On page 7, after the sentence that begins throughout 2023, insert the following. Congressional Republicans have received dozens of hours of testimony from government officials and former Hunter Biden business partners and obtained troves of documents in response to their requests. This includes more than 37,000 pages of bank records, including personal bank accounts of Biden family members and other private citizens produced by 9 different banks. In addition, the Biden-Harris administration has cooperated extensively with congressional Republicans' probe. This comes on top of evidence collected by Senators Johnson and Grassley as part of their 2020 investigation into Hunter Biden. Instead of focusing on passing meaningful legislation or act on imperatives for the American people, in my new coming out of Homeland Security, meaning fix the immigration system, House Republicans have instead focused solely on this investigation, an investigation that has failed to reveal any evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden. Furthermore, to the extent that the Judiciary Committee has been investigating the Department of Justice handling of the Hunter Biden criminal matter, the evidence has shown that the department has handled this investigation apolitically and in accordance with all relevant statutes, guidelines, and policies. The same statutes, guidelines, and policies that apply to all criminal matters. The evidence also shows that much of the purported evidence behind this investigation on further scrutiny is not grounded in reality. For example, when Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer falsely claimed that China, through Hunter Biden, made payments to now President Joe Biden in 2018, bank records clearly demonstrated that the payments from Hunter Biden, as we have heard, were made to Joe Biden to repay a car loan for a 2018 Ford Raptor truck. On page 7, strike the sentence beginning, "The committees have collected evidence," through the remainder of the section, which ends on page 11, to influence foreign business abroad and enrich the Biden family. I am glad to have been able to explain my amendment. It is unfortunate that we are here today engaging in this markup, which is nothing more than a political exercise, some would say stunt, and an embarrassing waste of time. I started out this morning by saying the highest regard that I have for this committee and the service that I've been honored to encounter. We've done many good things, and in the last two Congresses, under Chairman Nadler, we have passed amazing legislation, even brought back to life the Violence Against Women Act that we have struggled with for over 5 years. So rather than passing legislation, indeed, to help the American people, my colleagues across the aisle are broadcasting their sole agenda for 2024, impeaching President Biden to help reelect Donald Trump. To that end, Chairman Jordan claims to have evidence suggesting that the Department of Justice impeded the investigation into Hunter Biden. I don't believe there's anything that could be further from the truth, when in fact the witnesses he has brought before the committee, including Special Counsel Weiss himself, have completely refuted this claim. Witness after witness has said that there was no political inference and that the investigation was run by the book. But rather than being honest with the American public, Chairman Jordan is hiding the transcripts of these witnesses' testimony and obscuring the truth. We can do better, Chairman. We work together on many good issues. Hope we'll continue to work together. I'd like to see us pass human trafficking, anti-human trafficking legislation. I hope one day we'll be able to do that.
Time of the gentlelady.
I would ask my colleagues to
Time has
support
expired.
the Jackson Lee amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Yields
Thank
back.
you.
The
I
gentleman,
yield back.
this gentleman from Oregon is
Thank you.
recognized.
Chairman,
on
I'll
the amendment.
withdraw the point of order.
Point of order is withdrawn. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized on the gentlelady's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'd like to offer to be included in the record the committee discretion to obtain witness testimony. Todd Garvey, Legislative Attorney, December 22nd, 2023, Congressional Research Service.
Without objection.
Mr. Chair, I find the use of the phrase "unfortunate" by the gentlelady offering the amendment much more applicable to the activities of our current president than to the activities of this committee. It's unfortunate that our president has engaged in, at least on the face of things, influence, the sale of influence offered by his son, or the sale of access offered by his son. And what I think we need to be keeping in mind, and the language in her amendment so clearly gives us the opportunity to call out the purpose of this hearing, which is to say, what is it and why is it that we need Hunter Biden as a witness so badly? And the answer, of course,
All right, it's doing it again. I don't know what to do here. We'll give it a moment. I'm still connected. So I don't know if this is a YouTube thing. I know some people think it's a router thing. I did a speed test on the router the other day. I'm getting enough upload, download to support HD. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a YouTube thing, if it's a browser thing. I really don't want to have to buy another 5G router. It's $400. Probably a YouTube thing. Lefty, I don't know if you were here one of the days of the Zachariah Anderson trial. YouTube said, "You are not connected." But then I'm looking at the bottom of OBS and it's like, oh yeah, you've got, 49,000 kilobytes per second, 5170. It's bouncing between 5170 and 4487. So I mean, I'm good. Frames per second, 60. Dropped some frames in the beginning, but not really. So I mean, it's It's going through fine. But so YouTube is like, you have been disconnected from the internet. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. But then I switched over to Rumble, and it's me talking about how, this is weird. Am I really offline? Because it looks like I'm online, with YouTube saying, you are disconnected. So it was going through just fine on Rumble. So I don't know. I think before I go and spend $400 I don't have on a router, yeah. And the problem is YouTube has had issues. I've had it watching other people's live streams, and all of a sudden just in the last couple of weeks the volume goes out on YouTube, and then if I refresh it, it comes back. So like I said, it's weird. I would have thought maybe it was my router, but I mean, if my router is bad, how come I'm still getting decent full, I'm full green. I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, see down here? So drop frames doesn't really mean a whole lot, but look at, there's my kilobytes per second. We're still on. CPU is a little high, but frames per second 60. I don't get it. So I blame YouTube. And the problem is the feeds for the subcommittee hearings, I don't think they're on. Well, actually, Right Side Broadcasting might have had it. Let me just look quick. Unless it's like a firewall thing. I don't know. Like I said, sometimes there's a 12-hour live stream or 10-hour and we're good. Sail right through it. And then other times, I download traffic glitch sometimes. Yeah, like I said, if OBS disconnects to the internet because the internet disconnects, then it'll give me a big red down here. Down here will go red. Wait, here. See this green or this blue? The blue turns red. And it says you are not connected. Trying to reconnect. I don't know. Let me see if I can get into Rumble. Rumble had a problem with the sync of its, I was watching, I can't remember who, and their voice and the audio was back and forth. Or it was out of sync. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Why in the world does this always happen? At least cut it off after Hunter Biden shows up. I really need to have my sister's boyfriend, Mark, come and take a gander, see if he can figure out something. And I also really hate having to buy a new router because, number one, they're expensive, and number two, I'm moving, hopefully, in 6 months, and the triplets are graduating. So I want to get rid of everything and start anew. That's the plan. Well, if this continues, there's nothing wrong with it. Oh. Well, that's another weird thing. How come I can see the chat no problem, but this just sits and spins? No, I'm hardwired to it. And I actually, the other day, I thought, well, maybe it's too close to the computer, so I moved it to the other side of the room. And I don't think that's helping. This computer I got does not have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. But it's a screaming demon. My MacBook was Wi-Fi, but I had problems with that too. But that's another reason why I like to use OBS, is because if I use StreamYard or I use Restream Studio, that runs in the cloud, and then it just dumps a bunch of garbage that ends up cluttering up the reception. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is just open a different browser window maybe. Or I just quit, throw something, or we just talk crochet. I should really put another camera downstairs. Like, you can go in the kitchen with me. We can make food if it hits the fan. Oh, it's not working either. Okay. Now what I'm going to say is, if it doesn't come back in a few minutes, I'm just going to stop, reset it, and do another live stream, but yeah. Wonder what will happen if I do this. Second. I tried Brave browser too, that didn't work. This is your last chance. Or I'm disconnecting.
Amendment notes that House.
Oh, see?
Fine.
Okay, so all I did
So rather
is I closed and I reopened the whole browser. Now we're back in service. That is
than
weird.
passing legislation, indeed, to help the American people, my colleagues across the aisle are broadcasting their sole
See,
agenda
now we're
for
back up to
2024,
720.
impeaching President Biden
It only
to
goes
help
up to
re-elect
720.
Donald Trump. To that end, Chairman Jordan claims to have evidence suggesting that the Department of Justice impeded the investigation into Hunter Biden. I don't believe there's anything that could be further from the truth, when in fact the witnesses he has brought before the committee, including Special Counsel Weiss himself, have completely refuted this claim. Witness after witness has said that there was no political inference and that the investigation was run by the book.
It's really frustrating
Rather than being honest with the American public,
the viewers.
Chairman Jordan is hiding the transcripts of these witnesses' testimony and obscuring the truth. We can do better, Chairman. We work together on many good issues. Hope we'll continue to work together. I'd like to see us pass human trafficking and anti-human trafficking legislation. I hope one day we'll be able to do that.
Time of the gentlelady.
I would ask my colleagues to
Time has
support
expired.
the Jackson Lee amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Yields
Thank
back.
you.
The
I
gentleman,
yield back.
gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Like a half an hour.
Point of order is withdrawn. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized on the gentlelady's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'd like to offer to be included in the record the committee discretion to obtain witness testimony. Todd Garvey, Legislative Attorney, December 22nd, 2023, Congressional Research Service.
Without objection.
Chair, I find the use of the phrase unfortunate by
I don't know where he comes
the
in.
lady offering the amendment much more applicable to the activities of our current president than to the activities of this.
Scott, it'll
committee.
save.
It's unfortunate
It'll
that
save.
our
I'll make a
president
note
has
maybe
engaged in,
and put it in the
at
description
least
where
on
you
the
can
face of
fast
things,
forward to.
influence, the sale of influence offered by his son, or the sale of access offered by his son. And what I
Let
think
us
we
know
need
what
to be
channel
keeping
you're
in mind
going
and the
over,
language
because
in her amendment so clearly gives us the opportunity to call
maybe
out
other people
the
want to
purpose of this
join
hearing,
you.
which is to say, what is it and why is it that we need Hunter Biden as a witness so badly? And the answer, of course, is that the nation believes, at least polls indicate, that the sale of influence was occurring for years between Hunter Biden and his father. Now, is that true? Well, that's why we're having the inquiry to find out whether or not it's true. Whether or not Joe Biden was directly involved or benefited from the corrupt practices of
know
his
that.
son,
There's been like
Hunter
5
Biden, and
books written
others.
about
Who
it.
could be a more important witness than Hunter Biden? And then to suggest that there's nothing prompting this inquiry is ridiculous. The record contains witness and written evidence that the president has lied about key facts in foreign dealings, was the focus of multi-million-dollar influence peddling schemes, and may have benefited from this corruption through millions of dollars sent to his family, as well as more direct and possible benefits. The current allegations contain an alleged effort to sell influence or access, as well as other wrongdoing. Corruption allegations involving a president are particularly damaging for our political system. They effectively dissolve the public trust in government. Self-dealing and influence peddling and obstruction all undermine the faith that federal laws are being enforced equally. So for this amendment to be offered to suggest that there's no link between the president and this type of conduct is ridiculous. The public is often skeptical of the ability or inclination of federal agencies to investigate allegations raised in relation to a sitting president. So the assertion by ranking member that special counsel has been appointed to look into this, the public does not believe that that will occur. Current polling illuminates the deep distrust by the public in this kind of effort. Roughly half of the public does not have faith that the Justice Department investigation into the Biden administration would be fair or nonpartisan. And polls further indicate half of Americans also believe President Biden broke the law in relation to his son's business activities. So again, the amendment is not well taken. One other thing, Mr. Chair, I want to mention, as an attorney who has taken dozens, if not hundreds of depositions, I understand exactly why we need a deposition and not an appearance by Mr. Hunter Biden before this committee. Look at this committee. Look how it approaches things. This is no way to get to the facts. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and then each time after you finally get to a point, someone on the other side rushes in to try to obfuscate and confuse the issue. That's why you do depositions, to get to the point and to have the time to do it and not be burdened by how this committee operates. And I would just say there's a huge reason to do exactly what we're doing, and that is get to the bottom of the facts that would address the years and years and millions that Hunter Biden has spent selling influence. And who would Hunter Biden sell influence about or to? Who? Well, it would have to be his father. There's no one else in his circle of friends that would warrant such investment by outside influencers. Mr. Chair, I could obviously go on, but I will just suggest that the deposition is the proper approach. His refusal to appear for a deposition and then say he would put himself at the mercy of this committee is ridiculous, and he deserves to be held in contempt. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman?
On the amendment, Mr. Ranking Member?
Yes.
The gentleman is recognized on the amendment, and then we'll go to Ms. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me begin by assuring Mr. Bentz that the Democrats on this committee would be perfectly happy to have the rules of a deposition, 45 minutes or whatever it is, an hour of interview by one party and then by the other, apply in public in this committee, so that the gentleman's objections about 5 minutes would not apply. We do not want, and Mr. Biden properly does not want, a private deposition, because we've seen, as I said before, that the Republicans have quoted improperly and from the private remarks, and have distorted what they said by quoting half a sentence here and half a sentence there. This amendment notes that House Republicans are continuing to harp on an investigation. And let me just say one other thing. The fact that half of Americans may believe one thing or another proves nothing other than the effectiveness of propaganda by one party or the other. It has nothing to do with the truth of the matter. This amendment notes that House Republicans are continuing to harp on an investigation that has produced no evidence of wrongdoing. Despite more than 37,000 pages of documents the majority obtained, and despite interviewing more than a dozen witnesses, Chairman Jordan and committee Republicans have yet to produce a single shred of evidence that suggesting that President Biden engaged in any wrongdoing whatsoever. In particular, the congressional Republicans have received tens of thousands of pages of bank records, including the personal bank accounts of Biden family members and other private citizens. Republicans' claims about the president's supposed wrongdoing are not supported by the evidence. Not one witness has testified that President Biden personally benefited from Hunter Biden's business dealings. Republicans have claimed that a check from Hunter Biden to Joe Biden is somehow proof of foreign corruption. But the evidence actually shows that Hunter Biden repaid his dad for a car loan. That doesn't need to be the subject of a congressional investigation. There's also no evidence that President Biden interfered in the criminal investigation of his son. In fact, the witnesses who have been working on the investigation have all affirmed to the committee that there was no political interference. The committees have uncovered no evidence that Joe Biden profited from his son's business dealings or that he interfered in the criminal investigation of his son. No evidence whatsoever, and that's why it's one of the many reasons why this committee motion to hold Hunter Biden in contempt, given the fact that he is willing to testify and has offered to testify repeatedly, is a farce and ought to be defeated. I yield back. I'll yield to Ms. Jackson. I yield to Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas recognized.
Let me
Kettle, yes.
express my appreciation to Mr. Nadler and to Congressman Dean. I was going to wait till afterward, but I'll take my time now very briefly and simply say that we've had every agency. I want to read in particular the work of the Treasury Department that has produced more than 2,000 pages of suspicious activity reports, SARS. The National Archives and Records Administration has produced more than 62,000 pages of Vice President Biden's records, on top of more than 20,000 pages it already made publicly available. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation provided access to and multiple briefings regarding a Form FD 1023 tip sheet, which contains sensitive information about a confidential human source. We have offered when I say we, the Democratic administration that believes in transparency has offered every aspect of what we could present to tell the truth. The truth is not being told here as relates to holding Mr. Biden in contempt. The truth is not being told because the facts evidence there is no basis for doing so. And if I might conclude, there is no basis for any form of impeachment against President Biden. There are no high crimes and misdemeanor. There is no treason. And every aspect of the government has, without in any way bias, presented this to committees of oversight and the judiciary. It seems that every time our friends on the other side of the aisle get in trouble and have no legislation to deal with the insulin $30, the Affordable Care Act, environmental crisis that we may be in, helping with inflation, which we've done, they throw out impeachment, just as the frivolous call for the impeachment of General Austin. Can we do something that helps the American people? My amendment should be passed because there's no evidence, Mr. Chairman, to move forward at all. I yield back.
Tap that
The
gavel a little
gentleman
bit
yields
harder.
back. Chair
You're
recognizes
too polite.
himself to speak against the amendment. The amendment would delete a number of important sections of the report. Specifically, I want to reference the report to about the Biden's interaction with this Ukrainian energy company, Burisma. Both the ranking member and the gentlelady from Texas said there was no evidence. Let me give you some evidence. It's called the 1023 form that the confidential human source gave to the FBI that they recorded in this form. Remember the facts here. Hunter Biden is asked by the people, the head of Burisma, this Ukrainian energy company, to weigh in on their behalf to relieve the pressure that the prosecutor in Ukraine is applying to the company. They're doing that because they want to do a big IPO offering and expand their business. He's asked to weigh in. He immediately calls D.C. Mr. Archer, when he testified, said he actually called.
Okay, we've heard this 1,000 times. He's got this memorized. He doesn't even need to look. But I did want to pause for a moment. Scott said, same DA that has framed Karen Reed, the Sandra Birchmore case. Last night when I was on Discord, I noticed that Solomon had posted a link about a complaint against Gravely. And I had said, while we were watching that trial, I wonder, in the 30 years that Gravely has been in the DA's office, I think he was assistant then, and it was maybe 10-ish years ago. I was kind of surprised. Now, it ended up getting dismissed because they had to do a writ of something or other. I'm an accountant, not an attorney. But it was a writ of, the judge had said the person had to do a writ of, I forget now. And that's why it was dismissed. But I have that Zachariah Anderson thing on top of mind, as well as, well, these subcommittee hearings are always good, but, I wouldn't be surprised if that would be a rabbit hole willing to go down and see the same DA if he's involved with Sandra Birchmore and Karen Reed, who's to say he hasn't put his writ of habeas corpus? Yes, Lefty, that's what it is. Good night, Scott. But I'm just saying, I think it's a pattern of behavior, or I'm starting to sense that. And so that's on part of my list. Another part of my list is trying to dig into some of the characters involved, the cast of characters involved in that travesty of justice Zachariah Anderson got put through. I tried to infiltrate. I don't use Facebook very often, but I did try to infiltrate it a little bit. And of course, you know, she only has certain things that are available to the public, so I was kind of curious if like other people have like had, you know, maybe fake Facebooks to, you know, become besties or at least friends, or I don't know. What do they call that? Catfisher? I'm just curious.
One time he said he called Vice President Biden. Here's what the confidential human source related in the 1023 form, again, that the FBI tried to keep from us, but we finally got. They meaning Burisma, hired Hunter Biden to, quote, protect us through his dad from all kinds of problems. Now, this is the confidential human source, by the way. In one of these 90 different depositions and interviews we have done in this committee, Scott Brady, U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh, said, U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh, tasked by the Justice Department to evaluate information regarding Burisma, the Bidens, and Ukraine, said, we found this confidential human source to be credible. In fact, he said in that deposition, we looked at where he was and his schedule when these meetings took place and found that he was in those locations meeting with these people. So they checked him out and found him to be credible. And here's what the confidential human source further said in this document that the FBI recorded. Due to Shokin's investigation into Burisma, it would have substantial negative impact on Burisma's prospective IPO in the United States. It'd be problematic to raise capital, given in Shokin's investigation into Burisma. Again, Shokin is the guy Joe Biden fired. And how'd he do it? How'd he do it? He leveraged American tax dollars. He says, you're not getting...
Oh, for F's sakes. What is it, 6:30? I think what I'm going to do is cut this off for now. Yeah, getting interruptions. I have to cut this off for now, or I have to finish it up in the morning. Actually, what I could do is start this. I really wanted to see this, but this is super annoying. And it is dinner time, and I'm starving, as I'm sure you are too. So I think that's what I'll do, is just switch it, cut it off, reset everything, and we'll have to do this in 2 parts. I don't know.
The money unless you fire the guy. He did this 3 days after his son calls him at the request of Zolochevsky, the guy who's talking to the confidential human source who the FBI recorded in this form that the FBI didn't want to give us. And that's the section that the gentlelady from Texas wants removed from the report. Now, why would that be? Why would she want to remove that section? That seems to be the heart of the matter. Politician taking actions that benefit his family financially and using American tax dollars to accomplish that end. Again, not Jim Jordan saying it. We have Joe Biden saying it. He said it on tape. I told the government there. You want the money? Fire the prosecutor. Now we know why he wanted him fired, because the confidential human source told us.
Cut it in 2 like King Solomon.
Why we couldn't see this, why we had to push so hard to finally get this information, I don't know. But what I do know is the confidential human source understood that Zolochevsky had already paid the Bidens to, quote, deal with Shokin. His words, not mine. I would yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from North Carolina.
I think the chairman and my thoughts went to the exact same place. The gentlelady from Texas in offering the amendment, in fact, in the amendment it says, furthermore, to the extent that the Judiciary Committee has been investigating the Department of Justice's handling of the Hunter Biden criminal matter, the evidence has shown that the department has handled this investigation apolitically in accordance with all relevant statutes, guidelines, and policies. She said she was embarrassed by this hearing, but she's not embarrassed by offering that language. That's remarkable on its own. But as to the 1023, they say there's no evidence. The CHS, who, as the chairman says, has been turned credible by the FBI.
This is insane.
And by the United States Attorney from Pittsburgh, He says that the CHS said that
Here we go again. You know, it did this.
Zlochevsky said it cost $5 million to pay one Biden
See, look,
and
it
$5
goes,
million to pay to another Biden.
Quality
And
goes
that he
down
was
again,
furthermore
too.
to suggest that's Hunter and Joe. Ladies and gentlemen, that's direct
I'm gonna just put it on
evidence
the
of a
lowest
bribe.
one, see if that helps.
Now, you'd say it's hearsay. In fact, it sounds like double hearsay at first, because you got the CHS. We don't know who that is, and he's not testifying in court. And then you got Zlochevsky being the declarant, the person who said it. But that'd be subject to a hearsay exception. He's a conspirator with the Bidens under the evidence that he's offering right there. And it would be admissible in a court of law if the CHS was testifying. So I'd yield to anybody on the Democrat side, on the minority, or anybody on the committee who can tell us, who is the CHS? I want to know who the CHS is. Who's the confidential human source? There's no evidence? Let's look and see if there's evidence.
Did the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop, you've answered your own question.
Time is expired. Maybe we can get, we're
I'm
happy to
just gonna
continue
leave
this
the
debate
quality
because we think
down
it's
on
so
the
obvious.
shit level.
I appreciate the gentleman's point. I think it's the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Dean, is recognized.
helps.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is
I
recognized.
don't know what that all means
I rise in
either.
support of the amendment offered by Ms. Jackson-Lee, and before my remarks, I'd like to yield to the ranking member.
I thank the gentlelady. I just want to point out, when the Republicans talk about the 1023 form, we should have a member, the fact of the matter is that the person who provided the 1023 said in the 1023 that he didn't know if it was true. So we cannot rely on anything in the 1023 because the person who provided it said he had no idea whether it was true or not. I thank the gentlelady. I yield back to her.
Gentleman yield? Or gentlelady yield?
It is my time.
Yes, I know. You don't want to yield. Okay, I'll be glad to answer that, though.
Thank you. As I said, I rise in support of the Jackson-Lee amendment because it is all about the evidence. Let's think about the evidence. It has been 608 days since Chairman Jordan received his own congressional subpoena. He has yet to comply. A subpoena simply saying, come and tell us what you know about the events surrounding January 6th, the lead up to it, your conversations with the president during it and after it. Come forward, reveal anything you know. The chairman should never have needed a subpoena to do exactly that. That is his duty as a citizen, as a member of this Congress, as someone who was here at the time of the insurrection incited by a former president. And yet, they're searching, they're struggling, they're wishing they could find some evidence here that would connect Hunter
them
Biden
with their
to Joe Biden.
insurrection is just
There's no
like
evidence.
Gravely with his bleach burner.
It's one thing to
phone
demand
blood.
legitimate congressional inquiries be met by cooperation, of course. Mr.
Yeah, we
Biden
go
has
stir
agreed to
dinner
cooperate in a public setting, right here. You could have him whenever you want, where his words could not be manipulated. It is another thing entirely to say there are rules for thee, but not for me. That's exactly what we have here. It's sad to say this is yet another pathetic political stunt designed to help Donald Trump. But maybe they watched yesterday what happened in the D.C. Circuit Court as the former president sought immunity, even in the case of killing a political opponent or ordering the killing of a political opponent. Think of the absurdity of where we are because of Donald Trump and those who follow him, like a lot of members on this committee. Instead of helping Americans who are hurting, for example, already this year, there have been more than 900 gun deaths in the United States. Every day we lose a jetliner worth of Americans to deadly drug poisoning and overdoses. We've got democracies to support, including our own. And yet the Republican majority can't pull itself together to do any of that. Second, in interview after interview, deposition after deposition, and the Biden impeachment inquiry has yet to turn up legitimate evidence of any wrongdoing of the president. Zero, nothing, and they have supplied thousands, tens of thousands of documents. At the same time, a report by the Oversight Committee has found evidence that Donald Trump violated the Constitution, the emoluments clause of the Constitution, at least 7.8 million times. A few findings from that report bear repeating. President Trump called the presidency, quote, the greatest infomercial in political history. Donald Trump certainly knew how to work that infomercial to his personal advantage. The report reveals in just 2 years of his 4 years as president, he took at least $7.8 million in unconstitutional payments from 20 foreign countries to just 4 of his hotels. We don't know about the hundreds of other entities. Did Donald Trump seek congressional approval for these funds, as the Constitution requires? Of course not. In fact, Mr. Trump attempted to conceal his enrichment. Worst of all, $7.8 million is likely a gross underestimate. We still have no idea the full extent of his wrongdoing and that of his close family members. We only have information regarding 2 years and only 4 hotel properties. Can we all agree that these findings are shocking, sickening, unconstitutional, in violation of the Emoluments Clause, which simply says, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, forbids the president to accept money or payments or gifts of any kind from foreign governments, monarchs, unless he obtains consent from Congress? None of that happened. And yet, oh, the outrage about Hunter Biden. Mr. Chairman and your entire committee, where is your investigative spirit? Selling influence? You've shown no interest in looking at what the former president did in selling his interests. It's in a desperate attempt to rehabilitate their leader. Republicans are trying to pin Donald Trump's misdeeds on President Biden. There's a word for that. Desperation. No, actually, it's projection. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this markup is about Hunter Biden. It's not about President Trump. I keep hearing my colleagues on the left talk about President Trump and that no one is above the law, and I keep hearing this argument ad infinitum. I guess what they mean is that no one is above the law except for when it comes to President Biden's son, Hunter. And Hunter Biden should not be given special treatment. He defied congressional subpoena and should be treated like others who have done the same, plain and simple. See, Hunter should not be treated with kid gloves. This man is 50 years old, literally. He's a grown-ass man. Congressional Democrats held Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro in contempt of Congress for not complying with congressional subpoenas concerning an investigation to January 6th. Hunter had every right to appear and plead the Fifth, and he chose to defy the subpoena when he instead held a self-serving press conference right at the steps of this building. When Democrats issued subpoenas to Republicans during the House January 6th investigation, President Biden said, and I quote, "I hope that the committee goes after them and holds them accountable criminally," end quote. Okay, all right. Now let's do Hunter, and that's why we're here. Hunter Biden makes arguments of passion to excuse his behavior. His best defense is oftentimes to make the public feel sorry for him. That's right, we should feel badly for him because he personally enriched himself because of his last name. And again, the left wants us to treat him with kid gloves, and this man is 50 years old. Please, your daddy's saving at this point. It ain't gonna work here anymore. He should not be given special treatment because he thinks he's an American prince. And I don't mean Purple Rain.
Prince.
A witness does not get to decide his preferred method of appearing before the committee. The committee that subpoenaed the witness does. That's how this place works. House committees are not in the business of letting witnesses dictate to us the type of depositions or hearings that they want to have. This is not a kangaroo court like President Trump is seeing in the New York trial. It's up to the committees to determine the best methods that will further their investigation. And rather that be through deposition, transcribed interview, or public hearing. This is our job to do that, and Hunter Biden does not get to dictate that to us. And with that, I yield back the rest of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman will yield.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. I just want to respond to the ranking member's statement about the confidential human source. He said something to the effect that confidential human source didn't know if the statements he received from the chief executive Burisma were accurate or not. But here's what he said in the document that the FBI recorded. The confidential human source did not perceive Podjarski or Zolochevsky's statements to be unusual, self-serving, or pretextual. In other words, he thought they were accurate. He didn't know for sure, but he thought they were. That's why he said that. That's why the FBI recorded it. And this FD 1023 form, that again, they tried to keep from the U.S. Attorney, Mr. Brady, who was supposed to be gathering this information, sending it to the appropriate U.S. attorneys to investigate. In fact, they try to keep it from him. The things that are said in here, I think, are so powerful. And frankly, this was supposed to be, David Weiss was supposed to use this when he was doing his investigation. But instead, David Weiss decides to let the tax years where Hunter Biden owed so much money, just let the statute of limitations lapse for those years when it dealt with the Burisma income. So I appreciate the gentleman yielding.
Gentleman from Texas, yield the balance of your time. I thank you very much. So to the chairman's point, this 1023 is the mother of all corroborating evidence. It tells from the other side what the circumstantial evidence already indicates about the payment of money for Hunter Biden on this board for which he did nothing, the Devin Archer thing about calling Washington, the fact that Joe Biden made the audible on the airplane flying about holding the money to force the firing of Shokin, the prosecutor that Zlochevsky and didn't want to get rid of, didn't want to see, he wanted him gone because he was worried about being protected. And the phrase that you just read, Mr. Chairman, is saying, the CHS is saying, I wasn't involved in this stuff, so I don't know. But he seemed credible when he was telling me he bribed Joe and Hunter Biden.
Yep.
Expired the time.
Gentleman, Texas yields back. The chair now recognizes.
Mr. Chairman?
The gentleman from California is recognized on the amendment.
Happy to yield to the gentleman from Texas, Sheila Jackson-Lee.
I thank the gentleman from California, and this is to emphasize to the multiple gentle persons across the aisle that my amendment, the Jackson Amendment, has much merit because it is based on the fact that you have no facts and you have no truth. Isn't it interesting that we would rely upon two nations, Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine previously under the dominance of Russia, despotic leadership until they broke free, seeking a level of democracy, pleading for them to be able to be a nation that welcomes the values of equality and justice and the management of laws so that there is fairness. But yet my friends are trying to dismiss my amendment, which is solely suggesting that you have no facts on what happens in countries like Russia. They constantly do confidential or covert recordings. They constantly do that. They have no basis in what the person is saying is true or not. No knowledge of the veracity of what is said, but they're going around recording everyone, called confidential human source. And so the confidential human source that is being relied upon by the Republicans met Zlochevsky in person on one occasion and has spoken to him only twice on the telephone. As such, the confidential human source is not able to provide any further opinion as to the veracity of Zlochevsky's aforementioned statements. Of course, my amendment should be voted on and accepted because President Biden has been proven over and over again he had nothing to do with Burisma, nothing. So to respond to all of those who are trying to cite a confidential human source, it is of no value. It is like pouring a water into a pot full of holes.
Just remember when we
you
were
get through,
watching the
you have
Zechariah
nothing.
Anderson trial.
We don't have anything. And so I would ask my colleagues to support the Jackson Lee
Gratefully,
Amendment, which
Dingleberry
indicates
had
that
all
with
of
all
his
of the thousands of
tells,
pages
his
from the
wing,
Treasury Department, from FBI, IRS, all these
quenching
agencies,
his thirst
White House willingness to be open and
ferociously
to
with
present
his water
themselves forward,
bottle.
there is no reason to proceed as
Those
we
are
are proceeding.
tells
Ask my colleagues to support the Jackson Lee Amendment.
that
Gentleman yields.
I yield
these
back.
people exhibit
Gentleman from
as
California
well.
yields back. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized. Mr. Biggs.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know why they
So,
keep striking the last word. I don't know what that
having
means.
attended the deposition of Devin Archer, and there were
I
only
like him
3
to
members
Biggs.
of Congress in that deposition.
Although I don't think he treated that Brandon
Chairman,
Strzok
Mr.
very
Jordan,
good.
myself, Mr. Goldman
CPAC
on the
last
Democrat
year.
side.
Or was it the year before?
And what I find interesting is that this amendment is moving to strike all of this very important information which demonstrates a criminal conspiracy on the part of the president. So I ask questions. Mr. Jordan did, Mr. Goldman did. And of course, who was the brand that Devin Archer, Hunter Biden, and his Rob Walker, that partnership, what was the brand they were selling? It was Joe Biden. He admitted it. Well, could it be anybody else in the Biden family? No, we were selling Joe Biden.
Had that interview with
what we were
Tucker
doing.
Carlson. That was what?
So
a little
you
over 3
begin talking,
years
there's
ago.
money that goes on. You see Joe
This is
Biden
not
is
a surprise
involved
to
in the
anybody.
business. He's making phone calls. He's making appearances. Money is coming in and exchanging hands. Shortly after phone calls, shortly after Joe Biden goes to a restaurant to meet with the wife of the former mayor of Moscow, one of the biggest oligarchs in Russia, $3.5 million right into the Biden coffers. They're receiving literally millions of dollars.
I know, but we've been talking about
All
this
linked to
forever.
this. So we say, well, my friends across the aisle say, well, there's no evidence here. There's nothing here to be seen. But Devin Archer was testifying to that. There are other witnesses that I don't think you've paid attention
Devin
to
Archer
who've
also
also
had
said
that interview
Joe
with
Biden
Tucker
was
Carlson.
the brand. He
Yeah.
was the product they were selling.
6 months
Yeah, so you got that on one side. So the question is, can that be corroborated? Then you get a 1023. By the way, the FBI should give us the underlying 1023, which explains why they went ahead with this 1023. Now, the chairman, yeah, there was another 1023, which
Nobody's told me that yet.
Yes, there was. And it's why they went ahead with this interview.
Be interesting to stand by and check out tomorrow.
great minds think alike, I guess. I actually underlined the same provisions that the chairman did. The former president or prime minister of Poland and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, Wojcicki said Burisma hired the former president or prime minister of Poland. So you get the prime minister of Poland hired to leverage what? The EU, folks. But what was Hunter hired for? To, quote, protect us through his dad from all kinds of problems, close quote. And I won't go through the rest of this, but because it also corroborates what Devin Archer was talking about. Hunter Biden's dad was the product, and what was he expected to do? He was expected to do things like was explained in here by a reliable source, to take care of Victor Shokin. So what else did Devin Archer talk about? He's in Dubai with Hunter Biden. They're at that sailboat typey hotel. They're there, and they're with the president and CEO of Burisma, as well as the treasurer of Burisma. And what are they talking about? Oh my gosh, we're having trouble getting our IPO out because Victor Shokin, the AG in Ukraine, is basically going after them.
Well, son of
Devin
a
Archer
bitch.
says they excuse
that?
themselves, and Hunter goes and calls his dad because that's what the CEO of Burisma said, please do. We need help from your dad. We have a recess, they come back. Well, you know, maybe it was just a DC. What confirms that? The 1023. Don't say there's no corroborating evidence implicating Joe Biden. It's all in this 1023 and Devin Archer's testimony, and then you start using all the other documentation to show very clearly a criminal conspiracy of bribery and selling access on the part of the Biden family. I'll yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
I thank the gentleman from Arizona. And I'm struck, and maybe I'm going to get a chance in a minute, but the continued
Good, I'm
contention
glad
that there's
some of
no
these
evidence because the CHS
well
doesn't
versed.
know whether what Zlochevsky and Prigozhin said was true or not, even though they seemed credible. That's not how this works. Unfortunately, I'm out of time. I'll explain it in a minute, but we got my truth, your truth. We really don't have differing definitions of evidence. It means something, and we'll talk about that.
The gentleman's time has expired from Arizona. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes on the amendment, and then we'll have the vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's talk about that just a little bit more. Evidence, this is not, actually everybody thinks this can sound lawyerly, but it's just very straightforward. Evidence is anything that comes within the rules of admissibility that tends to make any matter, any proposition, more probable or less probable, meaning that it has probative force, tends to prove one way or the other. And they have all these rules in evidence about when somebody who's not in court and says something that was said out of court wants to testify about that, when that can be allowed. And here we have what's called, it looks like preliminarily a double hearsay problem. The CHS is not here testifying. And Prigozhin and Zlochevsky, the guys who say they paid a bribe, certainly aren't here. But what this is a situation, let me give you a hypothetical, slightly different situation. Let's assume it's not the confidential human source, or the confidential human source isn't having a conversation with Prigozhin and Zlochevsky, but he's somewhere nearby, and he hears them talking. He eavesdrops on them, and they're talking about having paid bribes to Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, $5 million each. Now, in that case situation also, the person in the position of the CHS, the eavesdropper, would not know whether Zlochevsky and Prigozhin are being truthful or not in saying they paid bribes, but that does not mean it is not evidence. It is evidence. And it comes in through the hearsay rules because those people are describing a criminal conspiracy. The statements of a co-conspirator are so-called admissions of a party opponent. They come in through that rule. This is straight up, direct evidence of bribery. Now, you can say, if you want to, that you're not persuaded by the direct evidence, the person admitting that they committed a bribe or undertook a bribery scheme, but it's not evidence. So you could say, well, I think there's evidence, and it's admissible evidence, and a jury would be well-founded deciding on the basis of that evidence to convict for bribery, but I'm not going to do an investigation anyway. I'm not going to support bringing in the witness who is defying the subpoena of the Congress, because I'm just not persuaded by that direct evidence of bribery. I understand that would be a contention you can make. But again, even in this age when you talk about, I want you to tell your truth and I'm going to tell my truth, which is abysmal and absurd on its face, I didn't know that we had started changing the definition of evidence. But there is evidence. And even to those people who say, well, it sounds like it's circumstantial evidence and indirect evidence. Well, by the way, lots of people were convicted on circumstantial and indirect evidence. But that's not the case either here. When the bribery conspirator is overheard or is heard saying, I engaged in a bribe with that person, that's direct evidence of bribery. And so, in terms of credibility, again, I'd love to evaluate the confidential human source. I think the country ought to get the chance to evaluate the confidential human source in this case. It's that important. But if you want to say, and again, what's in the FBI and the United States Attorney have both evaluated him, they tell us, and they say this confidential human source is credible. So if he were in the situation of being an eavesdropper, that means he really did what he says he really heard what he says he heard. So some people won't be satisfied no matter what evidence is offered, and that's clear. But there's lots of evidence. And with that, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew.
I thank the gentleman from North Carolina. I wanted to reference a remark made by my colleague, the gentlelady from Ms. Dean. She says she's worried about guns, and we need more gun legislation. I'm worried about guns too, but we don't need more gun legislation on legal gun owners. But we do need to address issues like Hunter Biden, and we need to prosecute people like that who criminally falsify an application for a gun. These aren't talking points, this is the truth. Who criminally was drunk and high while purchasing said weapons, who criminally and illegally disposed of guns and was to be exonerated in a special plea deal. Talk about justice not being fair for everyone. God help anybody who did that who wasn't the president's son. That's what I worry about, and that's what Americans worry about. I yield back.
Gentlemen, time has expired. The question occurs on the amendment from the gentlelady from Texas. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chairs, the noes have it. A roll call being requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes
This is
no.
the third or
Mr.
fourth
Isa?
one now.
Mr. Gates? votes no.
Oh, and more spins. Goody. Yeah, I don't know what this is.
Mr. Ivey? Mr. Chairman, there the committee
The report's investigation
that the House of Representatives find.
I think I'm just going to leave it on this lowest,
recognized
because it just ping-pongs all over. I
Thank
wonder
you,
if
Mr.
it's
Chairman.
some kind of
This
buffer.
amendment would add to the scope of the
Weirdness.
report's investigation what the majority says is necessary to inform our legislative work. For example, finding examples of possible enrichment of president's family members. I believe it's worth reading my brief amendment because I'm pretty sure you're all going to be convinced we should add this. On page 10, insert after the sentence beginning Mr. Biden's deposition is critical. Add the following. The committee also intends to investigate former President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. In particular, the committee
not a
must
fan of
understand
Kushner,
Jared
actually.
Kushner's receipt of $2 billion from the Saudi Arabian government for his private equity firm just 6 months after leaving the White House, as these relationships were fostered during his tenure as a public official with a top security clearance while he worked for his father-in-law, former President Trump, on the issues relating to the Middle East. It is imperative for the committee to investigate his actions and role. In particular, the committee must understand if Jared Kushner leveraged his relationship with his father-in-law to secure large payments from
Yes,
foreign governments.
read Peter
Doing
Schweitzer's
so would
book.
allow the committee to
Kushner's
shape
in there.
effective and targeted legislation
it's in the
and
Secret
solutions
Empire's
that would
book.
expose and thus hopefully deter attempts at influence peddling by similarly
Like I said, I'm not a
situated
huge
family
fan of
members, including activities that could jeopardize
Nor Mitch
national
McConnell.
security.
He's also in the same
Specifically,
book.
it would include the $2 billion that former senior advisor to President Trump, Jared Kushner, he served from 2017 until 2021 in the White House, his private equity firm received from a fund managed by Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, often called MBS. These payments are detailed in the recent report released by House Oversight Democrats led by Mr. Raskin, which found that former President Donald Trump violated
where
our
is
Constitution
Raskin?
repeatedly while in office, placing himself and his financial interests above the law. To quote just a moment in the report, quote, Jared Kushner has also richly monetized his business ties with Saudi Arabia, reportedly with the direct assistance of MBS. The day after his service in the Trump administration ended, Mr. Kushner formed a company that became a private equity firm called Affinities Partners, aptly named. And within 6 months after leaving the White House, Mr. Kushner secured an investment reportedly worth $2 billion from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, end quote. Of course, the $2 billion investment in Kushner's firm is separate from the more than $615,000 in unconstitutional emoluments received from Saudi Arabia during the Trump presidency. The total the former president likely received is far more than what the report uncovers and documents and proves. $7.8 million from at least 20 different companies during his time in office. That's just 2 years, by the way, of this report, and just 4 of his hotels, not the other hundreds of business entities. You know, I agree with the majority on one thing. Our laws should deter foreign interests from attempting to obtain influence over and access to the highest levels of federal government, end
people
quote.
can read
Absolutely.
these speeches
If my
and
colleagues are
live with
truly interested in strengthening our safeguards against undue foreign influence and not just benefiting Donald Trump, I have no doubt, Mr. Chairman, that this amendment will pass. In the meantime, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the report entitled White House for Sale, How Princes, Prime Ministers, and Premiers Paid Off
goody. I
President
look forward
Trump.
to reading that, ma'am.
Objection.
I also seek unanimous consent to enter into the record this article entitled Oversight, Democrats release report proving Trump pocketed millions from at least 20 foreign,
good. Let's take a
20
look at
foreign
it.
governments as president.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I am so looking forward to unanimous support. After all, Jared Kushner was not a private citizen. He served in the White House for 4 years as senior advisor to a sitting president. All as the sitting president,
sneak
his
cocaine
businesses and
into
his
the Oval
families
Office? I'm
enjoyed
just wondering.
violations of the Emoluments Clause, millions of dollars pouring into their own pockets. And one day after he leaves the White House service, Mr. Kushner begins Affinity Partners.
Yeah, I
and
didn't
6
know
months
that
later has $2 billion in the account from Saudi Arabia. I yield back.
See, we all expend our craniums.
Gentlelady yields back. Does the gentleman insist, the gentleman withdraws his point of order? I would just point out that this markup's about a report on contempt for Mr. Biden, not anything to do with Mr. Kushner. And I would also just say, I think in the gentlelady's amendment, the last line talks about things that could potentially jeopardize national security.
I'm gonna
Jared
leave the
Kushner
quality at
was
point-
one of the
at,
people who
like,
helped
the
secure the
lowest
Abraham
level,
Accords,
just
which I think
because it's-
focused on peace and agreements and helping the Middle East. And frankly, what a contrast in the Trump administration with the Biden administration. I love the question former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo got when shortly after Russia invades Ukraine, he was asked, would this have happened in the Trump administration? I thought the former secretary gave the best answer. He said, the short answer is I don't know, but I do know this, it didn't happen in the Trump administration. And our best friend, dear friend, the state of Israel was not attacked in the Trump administration like they were a little over 3 months ago. Jared Kushner did great work, and to have this amendment makes absolutely no sense. So I would urge that the amendment be defeated. I would yield to the gentleman from Wisconsin, then I'll recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author of the amendment, may I pose a question to you? So do you have specific language around this? So the allegation is in regards to Jared Kushner. Do you have specific language around this to highlight how this is inappropriate and what we can do to create a bill that will deal with this? Is that included here at all?
Anybody reach
The point is to say exactly that. We should investigate
congressional
exactly the
person
facts.
that
We know the
represents
dates, we know
him
the facts, we know the dollars. We
for
know
that
Jared
district?
Kushner's public service in the closest levels to the President of the United States. And as he walks out the door, he begins a business that later gets $2 billion from a foreign
congressman
entity. All the
is
while,
the
during the
whip,
administration
Emmer.
pocketing millions and millions of dollars. I wonder, where was your outrage then? Where was your investigation then? When we saw in plain
got
sight the
anger
President of the
issues.
United States, right down the street here at Trump International, taking millions of dollars from foreign entities. That puts
I'll reclaim my
Oh,
time.
that's right.
I'll reclaim my time. Thank you for that.
That's right.
We clearly
Remember
did not get an
he-
answer there about specific language.
he,
So it was meant as
converted
just
the
another hit
post
piece here
office into that
to try to
hotel.
obfuscate and not deal with the issue at hand, which is
So they're saying
getting
anybody that
Hunter
stays
Biden
there while
here
he was president was
to fulfill a subpoena, right? I mean, that's
To
ultimately what's
peddle influence.
happening, and you see this sleight of
Yeah,
hand that's going on.
just to
But
have a
I'll
place
read
to lay their
from
head.
the 1023 document. Hunter Biden was stupid, and his dog, this would be Zlotowski's, was smarter.
There's more of this, Yaron.
Therein lies the difference between Jared Kushner and Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden didn't know how to run a business. Jared Kushner actually does. He knows how to finance a business. He knows how to operate successful businesses. That's the difference here. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield any time that you may want.
Yeah, I thank you for yielding. I would just ask the question, does anyone remember Hunter Biden going over to China, to Beijing in Air Force Two, and while his father was conducting official business, was meeting with business and potential business partners, and within a matter of a few months after returning, he received equity fund management in the amount of billions of dollars. Anyone else recall that, or is it just me? That is a true story, and I'm curious about the outrage by my colleagues across the aisle. I'll yield back to you, Mr. Tiffany.
I would yield to anyone else that cares for time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Nadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several comments. First of all, we don't actually know that Jared Kushner knows how to run a business. All we know is that after dealing with the Saudi Arabians from the White House, he got $2 billion. We don't know whether he knows how to run a business well or not. Number two, when you quote from that 1023, don't forget that the person who offered the 1023 said, I don't know whether this is true. The person who offered the 1023 said, I don't know whether this is true. So you can't depend on anything in that 1023. Third, as we said before, Hunter Biden has offered to testify before this committee. This committee has turned him down. He's offered to testify in public. He can do it under the same rules as a deposition, but he doesn't want his remarks to be cherry-picked and distorted for public release.
That's just like
And given the record of this committee, I don't blame him.
Because that's what they've been doing for years.
people have come in for transcribed interviews. The full text has been released for exactly one of them. The others have been selectively released, and we know some of that has been distorted with half sentences released and the other half sentence not released. For the committee to fully understand the scope of the issues that a report or legislation would respond to, the report must include examples of possible enrichment of President's family members, including Trump's son-in-law and former senior advisor, Jared Kushner. And we know, by the way, that he was denied security clearance to become senior advisor, but that the president personally overruled that. Kushner's firm received $2 billion from illicit connections in the Middle East for his private equity firm, thanks to relationships he fostered while acting as a public official with a top security clearance on issues related to the region. This $2 billion investment came from a Saudi fund led by the Crown Prince. This investment accounts for the majority of Kushner's funds, approximately $3 billion in holdings, and raises very substantial concerns as to whether there was any form of quid pro quo for his funding secured during Kushner's term in the White House. In addition, as I said, Kushner's security clearance approval was fraught with controversy. In fact, it was not just fraught with controversy. It was disallowed until overruled by the president. And Kushner advocated heavily for Saudi Arabian interests when he was a policy advisor to the then president. And if we're going to have a balanced resolution, we should include this as well as the Hunter Biden thing. And let me mention one other thing. There's a special prosecutor appointed by Merrick Garland to deal with Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden may very well have committed crimes. I don't know. I hold no brief for him. But Hunter Biden is not an elected official. And there's been not one iota of evidence that anything that Hunter Biden
Jared
did
Kushner wasn't an elected official
benefited
either, I
the
guess,
president,
technically.
or that the president was involved in any way, which is the only legitimate concern for this committee, whether the president was involved. And after all the investigations, there is not one iota of evidence that the president was involved in any way. I yield back. I'll yield to the gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you. I heard some talk, it was kind of, I guess, just off the cuff, but it was about Hunter Biden's business experience and abilities compared to Jared Kushner's. 666 Fifth Avenue, which Jared Kushner bought at the height of the real estate boom, and then was saved when it was about to go broke by, I think, the Gutteries, who gave him the money in some type of transaction to save the building. Was considered, I believe, Mr. Nadler, to be one of the worst real estate deals ever in the city of New York. Were you aware of that 666 Fifth Avenue deal?
I'm aware of that deal. It's in my district.
Yeah, 666. It's interesting, the numbers. And then he bought the New York Observer and took it and bought it at a high price and sold it at just about a nothing price, garbage price. And he basically ruined that paper, too. So I would submit, with all, without any particular regard or endorsement of Mr. Biden's business abilities, I think he's equal to Jared Kushner's. Yield.
Now yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Issa, the gentleman from California.
I thank the chairman. Amazing how we've now digressed into whether somebody's a good businessman or not. I would assert that this is not the committee likely to make that decision particularly well. I also would assert that the personal financial statements of Jared Kushner are available online because he did file them. And when I looked at him, I recognized at a minimum that he is wealthy. I'm not going to argue whether someone's a successful businessman or whether a particular acquisition was made at the height of the market or the bottom of the market. That all sounds pretty irrelevant, particularly considering that, once again, they want to bring somebody for whom there has been no referral, for whom there was not a subpoena from this committee that was thwarted. We have one individual who did not answer the subpoena, but rather showed up the other side of the Capitol, deliberately flipping, as I said earlier, the middle finger at the American people.
In this committee hearing.
And we are here today to hold that man in contempt. The hope is that when faced with the criminal contempt and the possibility of incarceration, not for the crimes that apparently he's already pled to, but in fact for yet another crime, not answering the subpoena, that he just might come and answer our questions honestly. Many on the other side of the aisle are saying, well, there's no evidence, there's no evidence. Well, I've got to tell you, I've never heard that you have to have all the evidence before you ask the questions in an investigation. What we have is an individual who goes and does business deals, and
Okay, so
then
apparently
those
this
business
is like
deals
the one that
affect
Hunter
the
Biden-
policies of the vice president, so much so that the vice president had one policy when he got on an airplane on the way to
I'm not gonna-
Ukraine
I'm not gonna
relative to
dance
the
with devil
prosecutor.
with this internet. Oh, and now we got the spins again. See? Yeah, I keep getting the spins. Hi, Pixie. Shun is back. This way up is here. Hello. Pixie's back. Hello. Yeah, I keep getting the spins, which is weird. Because actually now I'm on YouTube, looking at myself on YouTube, trying to play a video on YouTube. So how is this happening? Based Vet 74, hello. And welcome. We're having a tough time getting through this committee hearing. Well, this is the first time I've actually watched myself on YouTube with the spins on YouTube. Where are we at? 326? 326, 38. Okay, I'm going to do what I did the last time. I don't understand this at all. I don't get it. Although I am going to make myself a note. I do know that Right Side Broadcasting, or I have noticed, I should say, recently they have started having these subcommittee hearings on their channel on, I think, YouTube and Rumble. I don't know. I don't know if it's the browser. I don't know if it's the... All I can say is it's frustrating. And what's really frustrating is, like, I can see the output is good. It's the input, maybe. Try one more thing. I wanted to at least finish my hat. I don't know. I don't know. All right. Well, I think I'm going to quit. Now that everybody's starting to come back in from their various little things. This is frustrating and I'm sorry. I'm just perplexed on how come some of these live streams can last so long and never a hitch. And then other ones, there's a hitch. This is like the 4th time. So I think what I'll do is I'll do part 2 tomorrow. One more time. You got one more chance, YouTube. And then there was 2 other subcommittee hearings. See if I can find where I put them. One is the immigration and how it affects our Social Security, and the other one is how the progressive policies are destroying our U.S. military. So it's the most exciting thing I've seen on YouTube all day. Oh, yeah, see, that's weird because you're seeing me talking to you. So it's not like the output has gotten detached. It's just the input. I'm not able to get the input coming in, which is so weird. Wonder if you can see this. I don't know, for those of you that use OBS, maybe you can help me. 'Cause like look down here. This is my kilobytes per second, all green. This is blue, which means we're still live. There's the time. CPU isn't too bad for point something. We got 60 frames a second. So this, you know, goes up and down. I don't get it. This is kind of high for dropped frames, but I mean, I guess not overall, not horrible. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to tell ya. Alrighty. So tomorrow will be more subcommittee hearings. And then I think this weekend, I'm not sure what else is going on other channels, but here's some other things I'd like to do. With regards to Zachariah Anderson, I would like to do a live stream where we read through his journal that he's got published on his Free Zachariah Anderson website, .org website. Also, yesterday I did send him a letter through, I don't remember what the name of it is. So the service that you can use, it was only $1.29, and it was pretty generic. I just said, introduced myself and told him that I had just done a trial rewatch over the Christmas and New Year's holiday. Met some exciting new people, his brother and sister-in-law, and a lot of people from Wrongful popped in. And then I told him I'm trying to get the Wrongful people in touch with some of my other friends that might be able to get them, you know, in front of like Megyn Kelly or, you know, Epic Times, or even, you know, Liz Collin is an anchor for Alpha News here in Minneapolis. So, you know, who knows? Who knows? But just told them I'm trying to, you know, see what I can do to help. And then I also mentioned the fact that I am a mother of multiples as well. I mean, he's a twin dad. I'm a triplet mother. So there's that commonality. It was kind of dry because I wasn't really sure what to say. So I was just kind of like, and I think I sent him a picture of the thumbnail, the troubling injustice or justice or injustice, the troubling trial of Zachariah Anderson, just to show him what the thumbnail looked. I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't really sure what to write. I didn't write very much. So then last night I asked on the Discord Wrongful page, like, do they know how much mail he gets? And they did say that he does. And then I asked if I could like send stamps or like self-addressed stamped envelopes. And the only reason I did it through that service is because if I mail an actual letter, then it has to go all the way to somewhere. And then all they do is take it out of the envelope and make a color copy of it anyway. So I thought, well, this is only $1.29. So, I mean, it's not that much more than a stamp and paper, really. And then they said he does like to send stuff back, but he does have envelopes and stamps. And so I said, well, just let me know, like when he runs out of that, I can throw a few dollars in for that. And they also said he does like to send actual letters back to people, because if he sends them back through that service, they get read. So I thought that was interesting. And then I just was kind of curious, like, you know, does he, I mean, if he gets a lot of mail, I don't want to bother him. But if he doesn't get very much mail, I can I mean, I can write pages. You know, I can talk a lot. I can type a lot too. Today it's a little bit of snow, 31 degrees. I tried to do a subcommittee hearing. Solomon got this thing for Gravely, which was dismissed, that I want to look at. I don't even know how much he wants to talk about his trial. Probably not much. So, I don't know. I thought maybe it'd be kind of nice to read his journal that he has posted on that website and get more familiar with like his personality and maybe that'll help. I don't know. I mean, if he's got all day long, I should really send him a book. Anyway. All right. Well, let's see. Let's try one more time. It's not working. All right, so I'm going to do that. I don't have an outro for you because I download, or do I? No, I don't. I don't think I do. No, my flag one, I think, disappeared. This one is just music and a flag. All right, well, we'll do part B tomorrow. Plus, I think what we'll do is we'll start with the hunt. He must have walked into a different committee meeting. I don't know. I thought it was this one. Alrighty. Sigh. Okay, so we'll do that. Tomorrow we'll start off with, that actually will work good because I do like to start them on a delay because I usually have to break and vote and have all kinds of garbage. So we'll start off early in the morning tomorrow with finishing this hearing. We'll preface that with the video of him storming out of the meeting. Must have been a different one. And then we will do the, I think, the immigration cost to Social Security House Committee hearing first. And then we'll do the progressive policies in the U.S. Military second. Some of these hearings last a really long time, and some of them don't last, more than a couple hours. So it's just kind of depends. Both of these ones today are long. All right, people, have a wonderful day, and we will see you soon.